Well, welcome back. Thank you for that intro. So, before we get into the main stuff, I always have these little tidbits that like come to me through the week. One of them was a couple times ago we talked about knowledge versus experience and how sometimes just knowing how to do something well that nobody else can do is better than having a college degree. So I was thinking about probably the most obvious classic example is Hollywood, where they say it's not what you know, but a lot of times it's who you know. So I mean, you could be I don't think it's really a PhD, but you can have a master's in cinematography, you can have all this stuff. But if your dad just happens to know Spielberg and he likes your dad and says, oh yeah, bring your son on, it didn't really matter. All that mattered was that person. So there's going to be times in your life where the only thing that's going to matter is a relationship and that person liking you. And if you don't know how to communicate emotionally well, have that part of you that knows how to talk to people, it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have. So that was one little tidbit. The other thing is, so my front headlight went out on my car, so I had to replace that. But I just remember when it went out, I was driving down the street, and I realized how much darker it was not having that headlight. And it was like, you just noticed how much dimmer it was. And then I replaced it, and then when I saw it, I was like, wow, that makes, the phrase that came out of my mouth, I said, it's amazing how much difference one light makes. And just that phrase coming out of my mouth, I was like, it reminded me of this quote that we talked about last week, every person turning on their light so the person next to them can turn on their light, and we inspire people. So I just thought about that in the context of that. It's like, yeah, one light really does make a difference. We think we're just one little person. We think, oh, what does my vote count? We all have that mentality. But it's like, one light really does make a difference. People, if you're next to a person, that light is going to impact them in an important way. So just keep that quote in mind. So I think those are the only couple little things that I have from there. So, Dan Pink, empathy. Did you guys get a chance to go through that chapter?
Yes, sir.
So I'll just start it off. This chapter is a lot shorter than I expected. I thought it was going to be a lot more. I was excited about reading it, and it was over kind of quick. And I had hoped that it would be a lot more deep. So I guess we'll start on page 154. I thought it was interesting how he was saying, when Bill Clinton told the American people, I feel your pain, like all of a sudden he was seen as weaker. Because, president, he's not supposed to feel. He's not supposed to relate with people. He's supposed to think and be, at the forefront. We don't need a president who is soft and weak. So I thought that was just fascinating how somebody using the empathy to try to let the American people know, I'm on your side. I'm not just here to be your president. I'm here to also be on your side. Was all of a sudden seen as weak. So that, it just goes back to that whole talk we've been having about the subjective being oppressed. And then 156, just how, emotions are universal. Facial expressions, no matter where you go in the world, there's a certain set of emotions that people can identify. Having not ever been in your country, somebody from another country can recognize if you're sad or angry. And I think that just ties into the idea of this class, the image of the creator. We're all created. We all have that emotional side, but we've been taught to suppress that creative side and that emotional side. But just when you can see a scientific thing like that, say, hey, we all have the same emotion, it's pretty clear that there's a truth running throughout of all of humanity.
I love, even on that, one of the things that jumped out at me that I even highlighted was in the page numbers are all different in yours than the new version. So mine's on 168. Empathy is an essential part of design because good designers put themselves in the mind of whoever is going to experience the product or service they're designing. It's like you have to know people in order to design anything. But even I was thinking that even on a God level, we can experience empathy because God has known and understood us. Everything that's designed for us, we react to it in the way that God has designed us ideally, without all our messed up stuff that comes along, But I think learning from God in that and saying, like if we have hopes that our art is going to impact somebody, then we have to know them.
Mm-hmm.
We have to put ourselves in their story wherever they are. That's why I think art is so contextual.
That's good. I thought it was also very interesting on 157 where he talked about, because earlier in the book he says, the right brain controls the left sides of your body and the left brain controls the right sides of your body, so that we mostly use the realm of emotions in our right brain. So that's why most mothers cradle their baby in their left arm. I just thought that was very interesting.
I got a question. It's kind of related, and yet not yet. Can you all generally feel which side of your brain is more active? Because for me, I can always feel it's my right side. Like I can feel things moving. I can feel like it's working much harder than my left side.
You can feel your brain
I
working?
mean, kind of.
It's so cool.
What's it now? Left or right?
No, it's always right because I'm left-handed. It's
Really,
always
mine doesn't
right.
work very hard.
Oh, that's funny.
What does it feel like?
I mean, sometimes it feels a little tired, or like a little inflamed. Maybe there's a headache or something. It's always on this side. And that's all. You're just stimulated. You can feel like it's being stimulated, right? Okay.
You're the unique one, I guess.
Anybody else left-handed?
Kirk's left-handed. This is Kirk, everybody, for those who don't know.
Hey.
Kurt.
I don't remember. That's pretty awesome. I think the consensus is no. Not many other people sense that, but yes.
Well, maybe.
Just because you're different doesn't mean it's bad.
Also on that page he was talking about people who have damage to that side of the brain have difficulty recognizing people's faces because it's the part that lets us see many things at once. So as he was talking in earlier chapters, that's how we can identify faces, because the eyes, the nose, the lips, the ears, like we have to have the ability to see all those things as a big picture. When like he was taking that drawing class, he was talking about the relationships between the nose, the lips, and the proportions. Yeah, I just find it fascinating, like the books that I read, like things like autism, and then a couple chapters back where he was saying that one guy who, I can't remember his name, but he had dyslexia, and the dyslexia actually worked in his advantage because it allowed him to like turn off his linear brain, or he wasn't able to use his brain as it would, but it actually worked to his advantage because he didn't pigeonhole himself. So I just find it interesting that a lot of these brain disorders sometimes are beneficial to people like that. 158, he was talking about how there's even software now that can sort of detect human voice change and kind of detect the emotion, but then it gets to a certain point where it's like, okay, we just got to transfer you to a human being. So it's almost like, why even have that software if eventually you're gonna have to go to the human being anyway? Might as well start off with that person who's gonna understand you from the get-go and just get your needs met.
Save money, bro, because not everyone needs to talk to you. Some people just need for the basic stuff.
That's a left brain answer right there.
Did you feel that one?
You feel me?
159, he's talking about juries and lawyers. And we've talked about this a little bit before. But, I mean, that's going to be very important. I mean, you can be a really valuable person if you're a lawyer who can go into a courtroom, look at the 12 people on the jury, and say, yeah, I can kind of be intuitive about what I think this person is thinking, and we need to tailor our case to that to help you get off or help win the case. I mean, you're going to be very, very valuable if you're not just if you're going in and you're not just, blindly throwing an argument at the jury. So I think that idea of empathy, being able to put yourself in the shoes of the juror and seeing what they're going to think about the case. Earlier chapter.
It was cool when he was talking about how, I guess the system you can talk about, sort of learning different emotions and how you sort of practice that and recognize that you can sort of know the emotions on people's face and know like what emotion somebody was moving in, like the first stages of whatever that emotion was, which is kind of incredible skill to have. He wanted to so cultivate it. He wanted to be like really in tune with people
Is that where he was talking about like the micro expressions, or is that?
No, I think when he was talking about the guy that basically like cataloged all these expressions.
Okay.
And you can sort of go through them and begin to recognize what different expressions are. It's like
by
four
looking
or
at the
something like that.
pictures.
Yeah, I remember watching something on TV once where they had this body language analysis, and this person was looking at old clips of presidents and when they were in hot water situations, and they were going through and looking at what they called micro emotions. So even though they may not clearly on their face have a look of guilt, they were able to pinpoint like, oh, look how the eyebrows are kind of like this and the lips kind of like that. Like these clearly lying because they're trying to hide it by doing that. I just thought that was interesting too.
It's a great TV show, Lie to Me. That's what it is. It's called Lie to Me. It has facial expression. It's pretty fast.
So have you ever been lied to by the show? I mean, have you ever failed to? Yep. Yeah.
Because my left brain wasn't working.
Is this what you were talking about, Ebony? It says,
I thought it's the right brain that's the feeling one, not the left. The left is reason. The left is facts. Right, bro?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's right brain.
That's right.
is this what you were talking about? It says, and he found that 7 basic human emotions have clear facial signs, and they're anger, sadness, fear, surprise, disgust, contempt, and happiness. Is that what you're
Yeah,
talking
and then he
about?
goes into it a little bit more.
That you can, he's saying that you can, they have facial signs, those emotions.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is very interesting. 'Cause I'm just thinking about, as we're talking about, there's a lot of context. Like, just think about sports. I mean, people who like to play poker. I mean, think about it. If that's what you're doing, if you're one of those poker players who are playing for a living, to be able to read the person across from you, even though they're bluffing and doing all this fake stuff. I mean, if you're able to be more intuitive and not just use that part of your brain that has facts, you're going to be much more successful, because we all do stuff even when we're not recognizing it. Because, they say, well, like 60% of what we do is body language, nonverbal anyway. So if you're a person who can tune into all that stuff, you're going to be much more effective in all areas of life. And people are going to be like, oh, I need to get this guy, because not only did he know the information and data, but he was able to also deal with the people who we specifically deal with and make them feel, persuaded to our side, our case, or whatever, our product. 160, I liked what he said about the fake smile versus the real smile. I thought it was interesting. He talked about that one muscle. One muscle controls, the other muscle is spontaneous. So you can detect a real smile. I forgot how he explained it, but I just thought it was it was interesting that there's this one muscle that we can't control that causes us to smile or adds to the facial expressions of our smile. And it only happens when true enjoyment happens to us, and then it reacts to that. Like, we can't control it. And I think it made me think about what we've been talking about with the line versus the circle and the spontaneous. Like, people are afraid of that. I want to be able to smile when I want to smile. Like, I hate posed pictures. I really do. When people say smile, I hate those pictures. I'm like, just catch me in the moment when I was really laughing. Like, that's a true picture. So I think that kind of speaks to a lot of the robot stuff we've been talking about. Like, people are afraid of that spontaneity, like even that kind of muscle. Like, oh, I want to be. I was thinking about that. What if we were able to control that muscle? Our life would become a lot more boring. Because every time something happened to us, we'd be like, oh, let me control that muscle that makes me happy. And we would do the same thing every time. But the fact that it's spontaneous and we can't control it makes it that much more exciting, because each time something different is going to happen.
So when you're working with actors, like in your group, how do you teach them to offer up sincere smiles
Yeah.
in the midst of acting? What do you do?
Think of a funny thing.
Do you encourage people to connect with actual emotions and try to remember or experience something that was really funny and connect with that? Or really put themselves in the story so that even like when they hear it, they're hearing it as something that's actually funny or actually something that makes them smile.
I think that's how they get people to cry on the spot while they're acting. It's like take yourself to a place that puts you into this like very mournful position. And like I experimented with it. I thought of something like it was really simple. I had to think of just something that like harmful to my mom, and I immediately started crying. So I feel like if you can trigger that, you can trigger happiness. Because in my opinion, happiness is easier to trigger. So.
Which is very connected to empathy.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting about acting too, because I've always wondered that too. Like, how do they resurface those emotions to make them feel the realness of that moment?
Yeah, because they do. I mean, the best actors, like, and you believe it.
Yeah. 161, for you guys who didn't read it, he basically told a story of there's two postal workers and they both had similar symptoms. So one went to one doctor and one went to the other. So the first person said, oh yeah, I think there was a case of anthrax and I think I got poisoned by the mail. And the guy was like, well, doctor was like, well, we can't be sure of that, just go home, sleep it off, whatever. Died. Another postal worker said to the doctor, oh, I think I have anthrax. And the doctor was like, well, we can't be sure, but let's go ahead and run some tests. And the person said something like, yeah, I know my body, and it just doesn't feel right. So the doctor's like, okay, we'll check into this. Come to find out it was anthrax, and they gave them the right medicine and saved the person's life. So Pink was just bringing up the whole point of empathy, but then later on, he didn't reveal it till later in the chapter that the second doctor was actually a woman, and the first was a man. So just the idea that women usually have that empathy more than men tend to have it. It's just the idea we all need to activate that feminine side, whether you're a man or a woman, because this guy could have saved this guy's life if he would have just not been so logical and so linear and be like, yeah, well, the facts say this and the data says this and this is what I think, but really being in tune with the whole person. The thing I told you guys about the thing I saw in the Miller Center a couple weeks ago. In his book, he was talking about how there was this one soldier who said he was able to, in Afghanistan, be looking down the street and just have a gut feeling or sense if there was an IED down the road. And the guy was like, well, how did you do that? He said, well, it wasn't just all intuition. He said, over time, I sort of learned, he said it was both parts. Over time he learned and he could kind of, he picked up on some sort of patterns. So it was an experience. It's something he did over and over. It wasn't just like he got some weird feeling. But over time, his experience mixed with his intuition, he said, I don't know, I would just look down and I would get this cold, deadening feeling. So I think that's interesting too, just because you hear about police officers, they go with their gut sometimes. They follow a hunch. It's not so much, well, the facts said this, the DNA said this. Like there's just a part of us that is uncontrollable, just kind of, instincts, and we're just like, I don't know why, but I think I should go this way. And sometimes we just need to follow that because it exists for a reason.
It's kind of interesting that you can, in that story, this guy learned this. Just the idea that he learned an instinct. That basic language. When you think of instincts as something that you start with. You have it or you don't have it. But that over time and repeated exposure, that you can come to a point where you become so familiar with a particular thing. And it's kind of a ridiculous example, but I immediately think of the dog whisperer. And just the weird, instinctual sense that he has, just dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Something that everyone else is so out of tune with. But yeah, that idea that we can actually learn instincts through training.
Yeah. There's this band from Norfolk, Virginia, and on their last show, one of the guys wrote at the end of their final show, he was selling a book of his time in the band and just thoughts that had come out, and it was very philosophical, theological. But one of the phrases he had in the book that I thought was very intriguing, he said, life's most beautiful moments and life's most tragic moments are often followed by the same phenomenon, the inability to respond, speechlessness. And I just thought, I was like, yeah, that's really true. When you're looking out at a mountain or Hawaii, like there's something that just happens to you where you have no words. You really can't put a feeling or explain it. Or then something like 9/11, when you see that happen, all you can do is shake your head and your mouth is dry. Your emotional part of you does not understand what is going on. And so I think to kind of key in on that idea, there's parts of us that are built that way where the only thing that can respond to them are also unexplainable responses. So if your emotions can't understand the idea of explaining something to it, there must be another thing that someone has to offer to it that is similar to satisfy it. When you think about, I think about like funerals. What do we do at funerals? We do all this weird stuff. You throw a rose on someone's coffin. I mean, that's a very illogical thing to do, because one part of your brain will say, roses are things that grow in grounds and to be smelled and to be looked at. Why are you throwing it on a coffin? It just doesn't make sense. But the emotional part of you saying, I need that thing to happen. It's abstract, but I need to see that happen in order to sort of speak to me and satisfy me. Brain understands person is dead. Emotion says, what? What do you mean person is dead? It just needs its own way to deal with things. So I was thinking about that.
There's like an anesthesia that comes to your mind and emotions. But the thing is that the emotions never dissipate. They're just anesthetized, and then they become unnumb afterwards. Because I lived in Jersey when 9/11 happened, and my son went to school in West Orange, which was kind of up on a hill, and a mountain actually, in the mountains, and we could see the buildings, and they saw with their naked eye each building being hit. And then I remember we went home, we didn't know what to do with ourselves, because our emotions hadn't caught up with reality. It's almost like it's a delay, in your reaction. It's really weird.
It's interesting because for 2 years I trained hotline volunteers to deal with individual crisis intervention, and a lot of it was teaching them information that they would use to answer questions and stuff. But when we would do our first practice work, they would have all this information and they would just want to spout it out at everybody and just be like, here's everything you need to know. And what was so important for them to learn was that when someone's in crisis, that those linear logical information sort of parts of the brain are just so shut down. You can't throw information at them, they will not hear any of it. So you just have to be with them, and it's that same, you have to meet them in the place where their mind is just a little bit shut down right now, but it's also going 100 miles an hour, and sort of just sit in that. I think that says a lot about how our brains work, is how we deal with crisis. So interesting and difficult to understand.
This connects with your rose on the coffin thought, but when you said that, we don't even understand it, but we need to do it because it performs some sort of function that operates on a level that we can't even connect with. And first, the two words that came to mind were ritual and sacrament for me, and God knows that about us, and so He offers us ritual and sacrament. So we get on our knees when we pray. That doesn't really mean get on our knees, but there's that physical act that moves into something, or bread and wine. We don't get it. We really don't get it. And especially the people who really think they get it don't really get it. Because it's operating on a level that's different. And I thought that's even as artists, that's what we offer to the world, is the ability to offer a ritual experience or some sort of sacramental moment where they can connect with something that they didn't know they were looking for, or can connect with something that has been laying dormant within them. I think that's a gift we have to bring to.
I you know, that's making me have another thought about the other end of the spectrum, like when something good happens to you. I just started thinking about that movie, The Pursuit of Happiness. At the end, when after a long period of hardship, he finally got, you know, like a breakthrough, but he couldn't get the emotions out. You know, I mean, they were so big inside of him that they silenced him. You know, have you ever had something like that happen?
Yeah.
Where you're silent because they're too big, you'll blast somebody out of the room. You know, you're too happy. I'm talking about happiness now, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of the time I just end up jumping around and screaming, not really making logical sense with anything that's coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of like,
you know?
and I'm a loud person anyway, so it kind of just matches. No one looks at me funny.
I kind of object with the idea that the rose on the coffin is illogical. And I think for me, when we're talking about this idea of how we approach something from an emotional sense, or approach something from a rational sense. And I know for myself, and the rose in the coffin is a useful example. Our initial thought is, what does a rose on a coffin have to do with Frank's death? It doesn't make any sense. Yet, for some reason, emotionally, there is some significance that we're drawn to that sacrament. And I guess for me, a lot of times it's that emotional response that draws me into this experience, and it's only after I have that emotional response that I can then see the deeper rationale. You know, initially I blow it off. It doesn't make any sense. What's the point? It's kind of irrational. But I think of something like a rose in a coffin. You can't put the rose in the coffin unless you cut the rose. So the rose itself, like you have in a sacramental sense, you've killed the rose. You've taken something that's beautiful and fleeting and precious, and you, in a symbolic sense, place it with your friend who is beautiful, fleeting, and precious, who has been cut down like a rose. And so there's something that is logical, but when would we take the time to see that deeper logic if we didn't have that emotional experience that forced us to face it?
Yeah, I think if we were to, go deeper into the nuances, we would probably say, I mean, first, like the word illogical, I think a lot of times that can have like a negative connotation. But just I think emotions and logic both have their own language, and they're probably, there's like this intermediate zone where they kind of communicate with each other, like you're saying. Like the emotions need this for the logic to say, oh, I get why you did that, but the logic can't necessarily experience what the emotions is going through. So the emotions is kind of like, I need this for myself, logic. I know you don't get exactly why I'm doing this, but when I come back around and speak to you, you'll be like, oh, okay. Even if it doesn't get it all the way, it's just like, okay, you've satisfied that part. Now I think it's, a lot of what the book is talking about, getting both sides of the brain back into communication with each other. But I think a lot in this class, we're weighing heavily more on the right just because we're trying to we feel over here too much, so we're just kind of really pumping up that idea of the emotion. But I definitely think the two should be in union all the time.
But could the logic of that act be, it's the last gift you're going to give that person?
Yeah.
I think it could be a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, for
Yeah,
each
I think
person.
That's the
I
power
don't
of
think
symbol.
it's illogical. It's just symbolic. You know, I think
Yeah.
things that are
Exactly.
symbolic for you, they don't necessarily need to make logical sense. Like you sit down and think about it like a math problem. It's in the doing and the symbolism that it all makes sense to you on a deeper level. That's not like information in, out.
Yeah, it's not linear, it's interpretive.
Mhm.
It's a different sort of logic, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. 161 too. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but he was talking about the idea of becoming detached versus attached. And both, like we're saying, both are important. If you're a doctor, you have to be able to detach yourself from that person enough to say, look, little, especially when you're a little kid and you got to get a shot. If you were so compassionate, like, I don't want to hurt your arm with this shot. It's like, well, they need this flu shot. So it's like you have to have both, because if you're too compassionate, you're never going to hurt anybody, especially in times when they need to be hurt a little bit to avoid the later bigger hurt. But if you're completely detached all the time, like, you're just not going to care. Shut up, kid. Stick him in the butt with the syringe. It's like, well, yeah, they needed that shot, but they could use a little, like you're saying. I think that's the cool thing about art. I see art as a sort of, anesthetic. Like, you can say harsh things to people as long as you present it in a cool way. Like, I can do a poem and just blast you, like, you need to get a job that you love, and why are you sitting at that desk and you're stupid? And people are like, man, oh, this hurts, but I like what he's doing with those words, That's the cool thing I love about art.
I like the music that he's
exactly.
playing with this.
It allows you to, hit people over the head, but they'll take it. So I think, kind of take an idea of truth and beauty. Beauty is a sort of, like Ken Robinson said, beauty is an aesthetic. But in this sense, beauty is an anesthetic, in that it kind of dulls the pain.
You better write something about that.
I've already done it. So I think the perfect example we talk about, is Jesus. He's at the woman at the well, and he's like, yeah, and you got 6 husbands, and you've been with this dude, and she's running off telling people, like, look at this guy. He told me everything about my sins. Like, who celebrates their sins? But it must have been something about
who celebrates somebody telling
exactly.
their sins. I see. And the one you're with now is not even your husband.
Yeah, she's running telling strangers about this. So it's like, what did he say? How did he say it in such a way that she was able to receive that truth and yet not feel offended and,
because he
condemned?
gave a solution.
What'd you say?
That hippie, that like hippie folk singer Jesus pulled out a guitar and played the song.
Because she said he gave her something for that thirst. That's why. She said it wasn't from Jacob's well, Jacob, our father's well, but he satisfied that thirst she had.
Yeah.
It's better than the guitar.
But that's what made her run around and tell everybody.
So the last thing on 167, he was talking about that book. I actually read this book, Essential Difference, where he's talking about the female brain versus the male brain. And like I said, to balance out everything, I think what we're going to get into tonight, you'll kind of see how this all relates. But I think it's important to balance out the male and the female, the masculine and feminine, because I kind of pulled out from 167 this idea about attention to detail. And I think it's important on the feminine side, like, we need to have that attention to detail of each other. Like, sitting down with a person, listening to their words. What are they really saying? Not just, okay, so this is what you need to do. Like, really listening and spending time with people and tuning in to the minute nuances of who they are as a human being. And I think that's more of the feminine side to people. But then you have the more masculine side, which is more in tune to details of objects. And that's very important, because we can have roads and streets and internet and people designing software code and going through deleting a zero and a parentheses and a space. Like, we wouldn't have all this stuff. So, the structure is important, but then the people are important. So I think it's just interesting how men, or the male brain, is more interested in details, but it's more of objects and systems. And then the feminine brain is more interested in details of people. That's another, like, kind of relating to the knowledge and experience thing, and relating to how people, like men and women, can do things differently. So one of my favorite shows I watch is called The Millionaire Matchmaker, a reality show.
Oh, God.
So we got some haters. But
I will watch it. It's entertaining, but she is terrible and wretched.
But she's all right. But anyway, so she's this woman. She owns a millionaire club, where it's pretty much like you have to be a millionaire to be a part of this club. And she has a database of women who she's like, okay, you don't have time because you're always running your business. Tell me what you want, and I will set you up with these dates, and you can find love. I just remember one episode. It was really interesting. She said, You know, these guys are masters of their domain. They're millionaires. They've conquered the business world. They've done everything, but they can't get a date. I thought it was just so fascinating that, you know, these guys had all of this ability and capability to do something so great in the world, but then more on the, I guess what you would call like experiential side. It's like they didn't know how to navigate that. They're like they see stock market, they're like go sell, buy, yeah, give me those bonds, yeah, blah, you know, on the phone, and then they see a girl and they're like, I don't know what to say, you know. So it just kind of goes back to the idea that we need the other part, the more, you know, the part that's more able to relate to people and not just our brain. So that's what we're getting into tonight. Tonight, we're talking about, at least for the first part, now this may be as far as I get, we're talking about the woman of life, women.
I'm glad you started off with that.
I know, I kind of want to do my poem, but maybe another time. It's all about woman. So obviously we've been using this diagram to talk about how in both of us, men and women, there's a dichotomy of yin yang, male, female, left brain, right brain, light, dark, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, if you're male, you have mostly male, but you can't deny the feminine piece. And if you're a female, mostly female, but you can't deny the masculine piece.
Bernard, I think in the spirit of this class, like you'd be better off teaching us from your poem than from reading stuff off the diagram first.
Do you want to hear the poem?
Do it.
I will do the poem.
I think that'd be the more feminine.
Yeah.
All right. I had thought about it, but I wasn't feeling it, so I kind of abandoned it. All right, so this poem is called In Compassion. Woman. She is the womb of man, constantly consoling, holding us in the room of her hands. From the moment we're conceived, she surrounds us. To the moment we leave, buried in the ground in dust. Sperm enveloped by egg, our mother holds us in her arms at birth. Those same arms hold us at a funeral, and when we die, we're held in the farm of Mother Earth. From mother to mother, held by egg, held by earth, from one type of holding to another. She simply changes shape. There's no way to avoid Freud as we find ourselves in the arms of a lover. She is our helpmeet, our helper. We felt her shelter and cover. She is our shadow and shade, our shield and covering. Like wings of angels on arcs of covenants, kneeling, she's the healing to our suffering. We're kept in the depth of her wings, watching over us. She's soothing, brooding, hovering. Like the Spirit of God above the waters of the face of the deep. She's the place that we sleep, a haven, a harbor, a home of safe keep. She is our first. Our mother holds us at our birth. She is our last. We are held by the green grass of Mother Earth. We're born in our mother's womb, and we're mourned in our mother's tomb. She encircles us. She's before and she's after. Her arms are for armed forces and forces of war and disaster. When heavy levees, grades burst, and floods when we wade or in thirst or in the blood from a grenade hurts. She is always with us, with aid first. When we're afraid of the worst, we just fade into her and find refuge in her stomach. She holds us on both sides, whether the weather of water is a rising tide or a deluge or if we thirst from it. She's prepared before we ever get there. This lady follows us, cradles, cuddles, and coddles us like a baby swaddled up. She's present in every scale. She is the water that we swallow, and she is the pail so that the water doesn't swallow us. She won't let it sink or drown us. She is the drink that surrounds us. She is the healing balm for towns crushed by war and disaster torn. She is the calm before and after the storm. When we need that serene hush, breeze, gust of wind that blows through the green lush, trees and brush. She's the friend that means so much with a tender, clinging touch. When we're weak, we can depend. She's our leaning crutch, like footprints in the sand. When we tried, but we couldn't stand, she carries us through various emergency areas. In mercy, as a nurse, she cares for us, bears us up. She occupies the medical worker as a vehicle, vicarious. We're nestled in her vessels, nuzzled in her bubble, settled in her cuddle. She carries us through debris and rubble. Her voice is the calm, the ointment and balm, the mom holding the baby boy in her palms. She bears us at birth, bearing the pain, stretching her threshold, there for the very first breath of our soul, breathing her warmth that keeps our flesh from the cold. Warm from arms to arms, she carries us, and years later we return the favor and carry her across the threshold. She is our barrier, bearing our cross, lessening the blow of our grief, loss, and death toll. Physically, her arms are weak, but in these moments she exhibits incredible physique. Trapped car victims are crushed. She's unable to push, but to the scene she's the first to rush, telling us to hush and not to speak. She shushes us with her quiet and kisses us in the midst of burning fires and streets turning to riots. When our body is sprawled out in the middle of the street, she is on the gurney right beside us. In emergencies, she reemerges. She's the mother that is wrapped around us. She sits behind us on the ground in dust, wailing as an ambulance wails the sound of a bus. Lights flashing red, even when we're collapsed and dead. She still sits there talking to us, stroking the backs of our heads. She presses us against her bosom, embedded in her when trauma is near. No one is talking, but she's still listening. It's okay now, dear. Mama's here. She holds the empty, hollow shell of our body, lifeless, just our skull and skin. She can't push cars off of us. She can't push, so she pulls us in. She pulls us in. She is gravity and grace, cavity and space, the vacuum, the first, the last womb, so that we have a room, so that we have a place. When we're born in the womb, birth, we're uncovered, naked. Then we're mourned in the tomb, dirt, we're covered, naked. She is the sacred sanctuary. Her name heals the pain we feel. She's a tranquil prairie. She holds us in her arms. We hold her in ours. She's from which we came and then we marry. At birth she carries us. In earth she buries us. She's from which we came and in the same we're buried. Mother to mother, birth to earth, womb to tomb. We are wrapped, woven and spun like a loom, tight in her cocoon. We are swallowed, swaddled, cradled, cuddled and coddled, embedded embryos, embraced in the empathy of her space, empty and hollow. But we are filled. Her arms, her bounds, surrounds. We are encompassed in company, in compassion, in her circumference that curves around, in orbits. We're pulled in and drawn by her feminine forces, irresistible and vulnerable to the center of where her intimate source is. She comforts us. When comets impact the earth, she's the mother, the women that absorb it. She is the circle that surrounds. Her arms are geometry. In our time of need, she is the sister, the wife, the mom, and she lets us breathe on her breast. She is the breath, the break we take. She is the last one left, the cleft we hide in, the one who we confide in when we make mistakes. With hugs, she intercepts and accepts us. She is open, the wide receiver. When we fail, she is the bride that veils us inside and lets us hide beneath her. She never abandons us even when we try to leave her, and puts her hands to touch when we feel under the weather, makes us feel better from the highest of fevers. She is the relief, the healing leaf, the salve, the medicine. She is the open door that invites us to stay when all others turn us away. She lets us in, even though we've never met her. When we leave, she remembers us, even when we forget her. She transforms our hell to help, to held with the change of just one letter. When there's tragedy, it doesn't matter if whether or not we're clever. When we don't understand, she is understanding, not just holding us, but holding us together. Before we fall to pieces, fall apart, unravel and winding, she does kind things, wrapping around us, bending, banding, binding. We need your touch to give men courage and encourage and believe in us, nourish and feed in us, serve us like Jesus loved, unfailing, even when our hearts are failing, forgiven even before we start nailing the same hands and arms that held us. You seized that moment to squeeze even tighter and envelop us, enfolding us close. Yours are the arms we run from, but the arms that are holding us the most we run from. Though you are the one we come from, and you comfort and conform us to your mold and hold of your compassionate circumference, we come from you born, and come to you to mourn, and come into you to make new life form. Woman, she is the womb of man, holding us at the womb, at the tomb, in her hands, in the tomb of her land, never letting go. She won't exhume any man. From the birth of us to the earth's crust, never like hers will there ever be another person's touch. She is the mother, the lover, the wife birth-giving. She is woman, the one man can't live without. She makes life worth living. All right. So, woman, which we'll see a lot of that tonight. And I don't know how much we'll get through now. We might only get to the woman stuff.
That's fine.
But yeah, that poem definitely deals a lot with empathy.
Wait.
So, you guys have seen this chart before where I was saying, only linear thinking is where we are now, but we need to expand to the wider, broader thinking. The what is versus the what if. And we'll see this in later lessons. But taking that same idea, so the thing I'm kind of going for, this is kind of my big thesis in the writings that I'm doing, and I probably will add other stuff later, so it's still forming.
Get ready for that TED Talk.
Exactly, thank you. So it's this idea that as human beings, like I said, in us exists a feminine side and a masculine side. But similar to how we neglect the creativity and the variety and the broad scope of life, you can, I think, looking at dating and relationships in these other things in life kind of are microcosms of a macrocosm of what's happening under the surface. So, typical example of, the husband sitting at home, his wife's trying to get his attention, but all he can see is the TV, and he can't see the person. That's kind of how we are now. We see lots of objects and things, but we're not seeing people. So we neglect, we ignore, we avoid, which leaves a void, our feminine side, which people don't like to hear, and we're going to talk about why. Let's get one chart. So if we go to this chart, male, image. Somebody preached a sermon once at our church, and I had never really stopped to listen to the wording of the verses, which is, I think, something we all need to do. When people read verses now, we need to really listen to what is being said. So it's saying, in the beginning, God created man, male and female created he, them. And the person went on to say, it's kind of this idea of if this is God and he created human race, his identity is this combination of male and female. And I was like, oh, I never really thought of it in that way. Even though it clearly says male and female created he, them. So it's this idea that mankind is, duality that is a representation of who God is as a whole. And for us, like I said, obviously the male has more of the masculine attributes and female has more of the feminine attributes. Although you could be a woman and be more masculine type, or be a man and be more feminine type. Ultimately, we can't see the whole picture until man and woman come together and show the whole picture, because only God is the one who is the complete total picture. So separate us from one another, we don't see the whole picture. So what I'm going for It's this idea that I think it all. This is my thesis. In the beginning, God created Adam and Eve, man and woman, male and female, and everything was balanced and equal. Now, in the world, we see this dominance of masculinity, and not just men dominating women, but our masculine side within us all dominating our more feminine side. I went over this today, now I'm trying to figure out where to go. All the plans have changed.
There's a pretty interesting thing with folks who are pretty into like personality tests and things like that, Myers-Briggs tests.
Yeah.
And they say that a lot of times, people are like, oh, I'm right down the middle. I'm right down the middle of an introvert extrovert, for instance. And they say, I'm both. I can be either one, really. And a lot of folks think that, okay, well, if you're really more towards the middle, then look towards like what does the culture that you're surrounded by value the most? Okay, well, the culture in American culture generally tends to like value the extrovert. The one who can get up and talk and be, like interact and be charismatic like that. In a group setting, that's very American. I'd go get them sort of thing. And so a lot of folks who think they're right down the middle on introvert extrovert tend to actually be introverts who have had to learn how to be an extrovert. So they're like, oh, I'm right down the middle. And it's and kind of what you're saying about like some of the just in our sort of like the way we're splitting it up, like the more male attributes, dominating the females, because the cultures that we're in they reinforce that our whole life. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to feel the freedom to actually be more balanced and be who you were meant to be in that, and not feel like you're having to put up a certain meet certain expectations in culture.
Mm-hmm. So my friend sent me this sermon. It's called Matriarchal Leadership, and so basically it went through Genesis and was saying, it wasn't until Adam and Eve ate from the tree that God then gave this curse that said, now, the man shall rule over you and you will still want his affections. So he was saying we've had this mentality that it's supposed to be men here and women here. It's like that was never the intention. It was always this balance, but once they ate from the tree, then it was a curse. But now, since we're not under the curse, or at least those who believe in Christ are not under the curse, it's supposed to be this and not this. And it was also interesting, I heard twice in the same week, once from Daniel and then something I heard on TV, the idea that if you look at Genesis again and you read, never does God call Eve Eve. Adam calls Eve Eve. So in essence, when God was saying Adam, he was referring to them as a unit. Yeah. Like there was never a separate thing. So, the two should become one flesh. So most people still live in that mentality of male dominant, females are the dominated. And you fast forward all the way from Eden up to here, and we're still kind of there. Maybe here, let me jump to this chart. Maybe this will... So something Ebony said when she came back from her hey, will you stop being inspiring? Her 6-continent trip around the world, if you don't know, she traveled.
This is the second time I've been into a chart.
She traveled the world, and she came back, and here she showed her slideshow here about all the places she gone, and somebody asked her, what did you bring back from your travels? And so she said, I think the thing I brought back most was how women are treated throughout the world. And so then she said, there's honor killings, there's sex trafficking, women can't show their face, they're unequal in social status. And so I thought that was interesting, especially since I had already been thinking about a lot of this. So I just thought, that's taking that idea, like I said, as just a picture of something going on underneath the surface. Using these things that Ebony talked about, like honor killing, sex trafficking, exploitation, using that to kind of look under the surface at a much bigger spiritual picture. So here in the middle I have, our half of the yang, the woman. So what I put up here is, there's women and we exploit them versus explore them. So if you look at it from the context of creativity and sexuality, so you have sex sells, billboards. We put women on billboards and they're kind of there for the visual image, but we're not really humanizing them. We're just kind of using them for what they can give us at the moment. So like this guy. So he sees this girl and he's getting something out of it, but she's being, dehumanized. So this is a false. Whereas the true is, this guy is in relationship with the woman and people will see them together. It's like, oh wow, he's such a lucky guy. I can't believe he's with her. Like she's being humanized. And, what the guy who's looking on is getting from it is like, wow, I need to be like that guy and put her on a pedestal. So if we look at this chart, so I have mystery and cover up versus reveal and expose. So what I'm talking about in this chart is, think about spectrum. So on this end, you have the idea of hiding, and then come all the way to this end, you have the idea of revealing. So then, as usual, we have our truth versus lie kind of motivation. So over here on the idea of, we've been talking a lot about mystery and the yin-yang symbol and how, the goal of life is to kind of chase the mystery and then reveal itself and then chase it, reveal itself. So I think this is the true version. You have like the image of the bride veil. She's veiled, she's mysterious, her beauty is covered up, and it kind of draws you in to want to see her. And I think a false version of that is, sort of like Ebony's example. You go to other countries and women are told to cover up, but it's not in a sense that makes you want to go after them. It's cover up because we don't want to see you and you're not important and you're less than. So that's the false version of mystery, covering it up. And then on this side, we have the reveal. So you have reveal versus expose. So in one sense, like I said, you have the woman, it's like you're revealing her, but it's not humanizing her. And then on this side, it's revealing her more in the show off way, like look how beautiful she is. I'm showing her off. Look at her. She's the one who deserves the praise and the honor. She makes me look good. So if we jump back to here, I like to think about that in the context of creativity. So billboards, they can objectify women in one way, just plain sex sells. But then take that in the realm of what Richard does, graphic design. Somebody wants to take Richard and just be like, yeah, man, we want to, use your skills, but they don't really care about Richard. They just care about utilizing his, what can I get from Richard to get what I want? So it's the idea of using a person. So I think, even though we're talking about this very feminine, I think creativity in a sense is a more feminine attribute. And today a lot of people just kind of use it versus they exploit it versus explore it. Prostitution, same thing. What can I get from this woman and make money off of her? And I really compare a lot of record labels to pimps and prostitutes because it's, you're not caring about that person as an artist. What are your visions? What do you want to do with your album? Like, what do you want to say to the world? It's like, ooh, he's got a nice voice. Yeah, we'll make a couple hits off of him, and then once everybody's done liking him, we'll just throw him to the side, and then we'll get another one. It's just no sense of really valuing the artisticness of the person. Speaking more of feminine again, people call the earth Mother Earth. We take from the earth, pull out gold, trees, don't put stuff back except for we put trash back. So we just take what we want from the earth, the Mother Earth, without caring about the long-term effects. Versus the other end of the equation where we should be, women, creativity, the earth, we should be spending time getting to know women, getting to know a person, like sitting down with an artist and being like, well, let's just spend a couple of months seeing who you are before we even talk about money or recording. Let me get to know you. So we should celebrate beauty, creativity, and not because for money, what we can get from it, but just because of its intrinsic worth and women's intrinsic worth. Maintain the beauty of Mother Earth, protect earth, women, creativity. So back to the other chart where I was talking about how we're taught to, instead of mystery, we're taught to hide. So if you take a lot of the woman or more feminine attributes, creativity, empathy, compassion, showing emotion, instead of using the idea of mystery, we're using hiding, which is, don't show your emotions. You're not allowed to cry. This is business. We don't need to see that. So, especially guys, they're not allowed to cry at all because that will make you a woman, which is, in that context of the, dominating one. You don't want to be a woman because a woman is down here. So if you cry, you're just being a big girl. Taught to hide your creativity. We don't want you to, we don't have time for that. Just put that to the side until we can exploit you for it, So it's hide it until we can make money off of it. So yeah, just the idea of hiding your face, hiding your creativity, your emotions, your empathy. Again, it's hiding is out of fear, mystery is out of love. You pursue mystery because you enjoy it, you're passionate about whether it's your creative work, your job, your wife. And if you fear those things, you will hide your talents, you will hide from your wife. Oh, I can't handle my wife, I don't want to talk to her. Or you will hide in other areas. So those are those two.
I was reading this article today, or a number of articles, and it was called, and I've read books about this before, it's called The Girl Effect. And it's basically probably the most promising idea, thought theory to sort of ending or alleviating poverty in a lot of developing countries, is to invest in, educate, and promote the health of women. Because they're trainable, and when women either make or manage the money in the household, 90% of it goes back into the household, as opposed to a man's like 30 to 40% goes back into the household. It's kind of crazy when you read the statistics about it. One expert was like, men just are in the developing world just like are not trainable. And I was like, yeah, I don't believe that. But then when they showed all the numbers about when you cultivate all those things in women, it actually goes to education, it actually goes to the health care of the household and sort of bettering the community. And one of the reasons why China is kind of on the up and coming is sort of when all their women went to work. And I was reading one statistic today, it's like in developing countries, the sort of economic value of women being in the workforce is like, I don't know, kind of like $100 billion a year. So it's $100 billion a year that's forfeited in these countries when women are like subjugated, they're not educated, their health and sort of safety and welfare is not supported. And so many organizations are now going to really support women in their development in these third world countries that will better them bring new ideas, bring the other half of the workforce. And sort of like you were saying, how can we really be top-notch societies when half of our population is not functioning, on an equivalent level? That just doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
They talked about, I read about this couple that started this movement with microloans, like $65 to women that in developing countries. And they said, just like you said in that study, that the men would take the money around to town and show off and buy things for people like drinks and stuff like that, but the women would improve the health of their family, the education of their children. They would give some to their community, but these little microloans were to help them start businesses. And they took the income and they everything around them came to more life.
That's what my neighbor does. He goes to Nicaragua, Guatemala, and for years he first started out just teaching women how to build outdoor solar ovens, so that they didn't have to spend all their time gathering wood for fires and just going farther and farther for wood, so they could build fires to cook all day. They could put stuff in in their oven, and they could cook it, and they could be doing other stuff, and then like that led to, well, what else? Like, well, now what have we freed them to do? And so like started just setting them up, and so he's got like women will actually work together better. So groups of women will come together in a co-op and start like juice companies. you know, and they've like just started doing all this stuff. And he's like, I don't even bother working with the men because they just sit around and get drunk all day. Yeah, I mean, really, they sit around and get drunk all day. And the women just, and the women are the ones doing the real developing in the developing countries.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, and
I
then
can't relate
like,
to that at all.
I think it's interesting though, our focus in the U.S. has been, well, not in the same way, but because it hasn't been as much nurturing to women, but it's been like, to some extent fighting for their rights, and a lot has changed, even though there's a lot left to do. But I think what we have failed miserably at, and are still like really needing to just even start getting on board, is developing, like while we're developing the economic abilities and the equal rights and all that stuff in women, all those men who are sitting around getting trashed and don't give a crap about anybody, how about we start developing their empathy and their, like, that's why I'm glad you're talking about femininity as a human characteristic, not as just a female characteristic, because really, like, men have suppressed and have not learned to use those skills.
Yeah.
And so it's like we all need to be developed in the areas that have been neglected in our subgroups, you know, like, and I think that that's where, at least in America and probably in those other countries too, like, the huge need is right now.
Yeah, and I think it's like, if we're still talking about the masculine dominant, you know, part, so it's already dominating the female part, but then even within themselves, they're dominating the female part. So it's like the female has no way to get in if you're dominating both, you know? So yeah, I mean.
Well, the hope for a lot of folks who are focusing on helping women develop in these emerging economies is that you can either try and like get these guys to want to be better, or get them to maybe, you know, be more empathetic and be more understanding. You can try and make that happen through education or whatever, but you can't teach that. You have to make them want it. Right. And what better way to make a man want to be more like, you know, this or to move up than to set up a woman who is so embodying both these realities of I can be a woman and I can be, you know, successful, and I can, you know, that you're empowering her, right. And then you're making her the thing that eventually that culture will shoot for.
Oh yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that for the rest, for countries where it's developing and women have not been given that opportunity yet. I agree. I think that has to happen first. But just in our country, because this is where we all live, like for us to be thinking about too, like that we not neglect the male need.
It would be easier though to do it here, to change, you know, to I mean, whatever reason not whatever reason, but to work with men to bring them around. But the thing about the third world and developing countries is that it's not just a matter of male and female, it's religion, it's culture. What about female circumcision? I did a paper on that. What an awful practice, you know what I mean? And so, they could not get these people to stop it, or even for some of the women and girls, the women, to make the girls submit to it. So you're talking about a huge, undertaking. I mean, because even the men, I can't imagine the men in those countries just becoming curious because the women are beginning to be successful. I would imagine there's a huge backlash that we don't hear about. You know what I mean? Because it's coming against their tribal beliefs and everything smacked right in the face.
And even in our culture, though, I think we're blind to it because we live in it. But our culture is very much against men developing that side of themselves. I mean, I actually work in the field of sexual violence prevention, so this is what I do every day is try to grow this in boys, and it is really a challenge. I think, it's.
Yeah, we don't cultivate that at all. I would say we more cultivate in girls all the characteristics that are male. So if you see, in order to survive in the business world or any male, any world, you just have to become more like a man. You can't cry, you can't express, you can't even bring the parts of you that would probably be really good to the organization as a woman. You just have to try to be more masculine.
Yeah. Right.
That's what happened when Hillary Clinton, teared up.
Yeah.
Exactly. The
Bill Clinton.
Yeah, or even, what's her name, like in Clothes, Aylin. You know, like at the shop. You know, it's tough. Do you think that we suffer here from a degree of backlash?
Yes.
Of women. Yeah, that's what I think. I think that's what you deal with every day is a sign of backlash.
Yeah, there's been like all sorts of books written on that. There's a book called Backlash about that.
What was that?
There's a book called Backlash about that. So you're right, I think.
That's what I think.
So I'm reading this book now that I'll pick up at the book sale called At My Father's Wedding, Men Coming to Terms with Themselves and Their Fathers. And so there's a lot of stuff in there. One of the first things that he started talking about that I thought was fascinating, he's like, men, like even apart from all this talking about empathy and femininity, he's like, first off, men actually need to get in touch with their true masculinity.
Yes.
And one of the interesting things he said is that from the time little boys are brought up, they're trained like, okay, your job is to be a fighter, a warrior. So then they grow up and they're always looking for this fight. So then when you ask them to be like compassionate, they're like, why are you giving me this? I'm looking for the fight. Like you've trained me for this, and now you're telling me there's no fight.
That's true.
That's correct. So we'll make up fights.
Yeah, exactly. So I just thinking about. I mean, to me, like the poem I read, I think one of the things about the poem is just this idea of, rather than teaching men how to be empathetic, I think it's more about showing them empathy for what they're going through. You know, because like until somebody's empathetic with you and sees from you are, they don't want to hear anything that you have to say. So I think it's a lot less about like, come on, because I mean that part in men tends to be not their forte. Like I don't know if you guys ever seen this social experiment television show called What Would You Do on ABC? Like they'll set up these fake, mock things, and they'll have like people walking by and see what they do. So the first one was like a boyfriend getting really aggressive with his girlfriend. They were just actors. He wasn't hitting her. He was just like, "You're gonna go home with me." And they were seeing who would stop. And mostly women stopped. Like guys would kind of stop and maybe on their cell phone, kind of from a distance, and like, "Yeah, I'm not getting." But women would step up and be like, "Honey, do you need help? I will help you. Well, I will wait right here until." And like they would always ask the women like, "What made you?" Just like, "Well, if that was me, I would want." So like you're saying, I think women tend to have that more communal thing, where even if they know they could get physically harmed, they'd much rather stand up with another woman. Whereas guys, like they see stuff, but they just know how to pull the trigger. Like I'll see stuff all the time, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do something." Yeah, like I'm just standing there, and I'm like, pull the trigger, go. You know you need to do something, go. And it's just like I don't know what it is. It's just.
Well, is there a myth in your mind that's like, well, because I'm a man, it needs to be amazing, and I'm gonna have to like get into a brawl and like save the day, and like, I mean, is the goal like too high? Because to me,
I think it's just more like.
I think it's more likely that you don't want to get into a brawl. Actually, like for me.
Is it a
like,
man
you're scared to go that way.
Yeah.
I don't think.
I would be
You
like,
know about those man codes I heard.
Well, that's-
Get involved. Go get
that's
involved. Is it a myth? The man code, like
Man
you don't get into another man's business.
I'll get into another man's business if he's messing with a woman.
Because
But
he's truly masculine.
But seriously, like honestly though, like I think I was having a conversation with a young single lady. We were talking about the lack of decent and dateable guys in the church, and that's because like I think in the church guys are more likely to be brought up somewhat in touch with a feminine sort of side, but they've been neutered completely, and they're not taught how to be a man. I didn't grow up a Christian, so I was taught some of the skewed ways of being a man. But what happened when I became a Christian was some of that was tempered in a good way, I think. And so like my mom did a really good job of like developing that sort of empathy. One of the earliest things I can remember her saying is, put yourself in their shoes. Put yourself in it was like her mantra, put yourself in their shoes. And so this empathy, but like my dad was, I got jumped one time when I was at cross country practice. These two guys jumped me and beat me up. I came home and Dad's like tossed me a baseball bat. So you want to go ride around and look for him? Like, let's go, and that's like, so that's skewed, but like, there's this like, I was taught that it's a you get in there and you act, you do something, and I think that's the not having a fear of engaging is like where the true masculine really shines, and that's good, and we can develop that, and so like, yeah, what you were saying about men not being men enough, That's why they wouldn't engage. You know, and it's a combination of that empathy, but it's a fear of not actually being a man. If you're a man, who gives a whatever if you get beat up if you're doing it in the name of protecting somebody that's weak. You know, that's but I don't know, I didn't grow up with this fear of, you know, I was like, my dad was like, you're gonna be a man. You know, and that means doing your work. Don't whine, get your chores done, you know.
So is
be
that
great at
not
school.
being
What?
a woman?
Well, I mean, the whole thing we're talking
As a
about here
woman,
is, you know, is sort of false dichotomies.
Yeah.
I mean, so if we can use all the female language, you can allow me to use some male language a little bit. You know,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't agree with all the female language either, but.
Yeah, but language is inherently limited, and this gives us a good way to start to talk about different characteristics in our cultural context.
Well,
So,
I just wonder though, do you think American men suffer from the effects of like women's lib back some time ago? I think so.
Well, it's Daniel, who's not here. He could probably explain a lot better. He read some book called like Hookup Culture, and he was saying like the problem with like the feminist movement was that it pretty much, instead of saying women treat us the same, it kind of say like we want to be men too, like we want to sleep around like men get to sleep around, and so then in essence it kind of turned the man into not wanting to be a man, and so now that's why you have all these kids who play video, like they're like, oh, you don't want, you know, you want to be the man, like we'll be the boys then. I mean, I probably didn't explain it right, but just his idea of like it's kind of like a reverse backlash. Instead of saying let's get equal and come together, it's more like no, we're going to dominate now.
Well, that's second wave feminism.
Equally different.
Let's just specify. That's second wave. That is not all feminism. That is second wave feminism, very different from a lot of other types of feminism. But yes, that was.
What does that mean? What are you talking about?
Second wave is like the 70s, 60s, and 70s, and even 80s versions of feminism. So there's first wave that was like from way back, like before that, and then that second wave, and then some people call like more modern versions third wave or various things.
So how would you describe the third wave?
It looks a whole lot of different ways. To me, a big part of feminism is just saying like, sort of what we were saying earlier, at least, that by separating us and saying, well, women act these feminine ways that are just totally culturally made up, and men act these masculine ways that are culturally made up, and you're basically separating these people, so men can only be like compartmentalized, for instance, and female can only be integrated, and so like you're raised up to be one or the other just based on the sex that you're born with, and that's creating gender, and that by doing that you're not letting people just be their full selves. So sort of like we were saying earlier, like we all need to develop all of those parts of ourselves that are the good parts, and not develop those negative parts. And so just saying like gender is culturally constructed and not necessarily always useful. So that's the version that I more adhere to, but there are lots of different versions these days.
I think one thing that's good is to hold our definitions and our labels very lightly.
Yeah.
Because I think one thing that can happen oftentimes is that we get these different, like, I do this a lot, at least, I don't know how widespread this is, but you get an idea about something in your head, you get some sort of picture of how something is in your head, just like we're talking about having like particular languages about different things, and it's easy when you get this sort of repetition of how one gender is, or how one group is, or how anything is in one particular way. And I think it's almost like a humility of thought to say that like our definitions are always going to be limited, and we just need to be open to new things that might come up, and also with those new things, not to take them too seriously either. I don't know. One of my biggest dangers is to take things too seriously, and not to just like step back a little bit and consider things. That's like one of my tendencies. So I think it's just always really good to look at the definitions that we have and say, okay, that's good, but how is it not like that? Like not to try to label too much.
I think the other thing is, speaking about masculinity, like reading this book about fathers, it's really opened up my eyes to like a lot of reasons why I think certain things, and like how men. I think the whole father God image that you project your dad onto your father, that has a lot to deal with how you see him being a man. So I think most of us as men, like, we have no idea what that's supposed to be. Like you're saying, we have this cultural, like, oh, I'm supposed to work on cars and like sports and drink. Like that's the only reference we have to being a man. So when you see Jesus, like we talk about this in my church, you see Jesus and like John laying his head on his breast, it's like, oh, no, that's not what a man is at all. A man is tough. Or, part of it is, like I like how Joseph Prince talks about, he said, man, he's like, all these images have screwed us up about Jesus. They have, weak, skinny Jesus. That Jesus was ripped. It's like, I mean, I think it is part of it.
Turned over tables.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's another thing that he says about Jesus. He said, Jesus is perfectly even. Like he embodies the perfect balance of, he's like, he was kind, but he was never soft. Like he was hard, but he wasn't harsh. Like he was able to do everything with the right. Like he says, we'll try to be delicate and empathetic. We'll let people walk all over us. We'll try to be firm, but we'll hurt people's feelings. So I guess, the ultimate picture is you have to go to the original and be like, okay, what does it really mean to be masculine? But yeah, just something, ever since the fall and that spiritual disconnect, the father disconnect from the earth, I just think that has a lot to do with men. Because, I mean, I think women have that thing too, where like, well, my father wasn't there. But I think between man and the father, there's this stronger kind of like, this is who I was supposed to look to be a man, and I didn't have that, so now what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, but I think you said that. You said it before, though. I think that the Bible really tells us how to do it. Like you said, there was a fall and the curse, but then there was grace, which relieved us from the curse. It's all the stuff, the outliers, that start to move away from the Bible. It's the church, the preachers, the fathers, the mothers. It's everybody else that puts us into these boxes, not the Bible. The Bible really is very clear that as we come together, we bring the wholeness of God, the complete.
There's not a Juno Greek, male or female.
Yeah, that we're equally different. We're not. There's no 50-50 up here, down here. We're equally different. And there's no comparison. I mean, I can't compare myself to a man, because a man is so different from me. Not even opposite. Not even opposite. His brain even works differently.
Yeah, I think a good book, for men and women to read is Wild at Heart, just because it talks a lot about, how guys try to get their masculinity from a woman. And he said something like, a woman can draw out masculinity, but she can't bestow it. And so this other book that I'm reading too is saying the same thing. Instead of guys within themselves trying to figure out what does it mean to be a man, who am I, like they go to a woman to like kind of answer that question, like, will you call me a man? I mean, you could just look at like, all the sexual escapades, like, say my name, call me a man. It's that kind of looking for the feminine to tell you who you are versus, like the father saying, son, this is what a man is. But also the mother too, being like, this is how a man treats a woman.
Yeah, but it depends on what generation your mother's in. Because your mother messes up your head for your own generation. I'm serious.
Yeah, we all get messed up.
No, seriously, for your own generation, your mother tells you what folks her age, women her age did. I'm serious. Like, if and then I had to break out of that the 50s stuff, so I could live in the 70s. See, the 70s were very different. So, you know what I'm saying? So, you had to break out of what your parents taught you. But, back to your point, the Bible still speaks to that. The masculine, the man being more masculine, being focused on masculinity, and the woman being focused on femininity. Because the Bible says it's cyclical. As you respect the man takes care of you. Well, not takes care of, that's not what it really says. As you respect the man bestows his love upon you. And it makes a woman feel more feminine when she feels she has that covering and protection. Because one thing I remember saying to a man once that, you don't realize how much a woman considers her safety in her everyday life. And a man was like, what? Why are you always thinking about that? We are always
women are scared to sleep alone. Like, we just don't get that.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's because you don't understand that we have to deal with men that are not always honorable.
Yeah.
So
I
we
get
have
it.
to
I'm just saying
always.
that's
So I
in
learned
general.
that so much. I was like, I've never considered my safety so much as when I'm
Yeah,
traveling.
but look at this. In
It's
God's,
real.
the woman should. It says in the scriptures. I can't really quote exactly where right now, but
I think in Ephesians
it's
where
respect.
it says,
Yeah.
just wives submit to your husbands, husbands love your wife like Christ loved the church.
Like right.
Well, and that, and that whole,
Die
and
for
remember,
him.
that whole
So
section begins with submit yourselves to one another.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. But that respect brings that covering and that protection, that physically, the physical presence of protection that a man can provide. And then he gets the respect that he needs to
Yeah.
feel more masculine.
And I think also, sort of like I was reading in the poem, like, I think, at least this is my perspective, I think women tend to think that guys are like this, since they're physically strong, like there's this misconception, it's like, oh, why are guys so afraid to approach girls? Like, they're afraid of rejection too,
Yeah.
There's this mentality that, like, just go talk to her. It's like, I'm human. So I think, like, you're talking about reciprocating that physical protection. I think guys are also kind of looking for that emotional covering to kind of like,
connection.
yeah, because even though they appear to try to fake strong, like I said, seeing situations, I'll see it and be like, I should do something, but I feel paralyzed. Whereas I think women are like, no, you can't just stand there, you have to act and go forward.
A lot of women
Right,
feel
but that's
paralyzed.
because, like I call myself a situational leader. I'm not, like, it's not my natural tendency to lead.
Mhm.
And so I think in most cases, those women are being situational protectors, because physically they're really taking the risk that man will, hurt them too. Not that only men are physically strong. That's not what I'm insinuating.
Yeah.
But,
Well, something interesting my friend said too. He said, especially from the guy's point of view, well, he figured, that it could happen, but he's thinking it's less likely that a guy would probably hit the girl intervening if he respected women, at the base level of I'm not going to hit them. Whereas a guy,
He's choking up his girlfriend.
That's
He's
okay. I
not-
think that's
I'm
protect a female.
yeah, it's like
that's what I'm saying. Like, if it wasn't,
He probably is less likely to hit a woman.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Or he said, a guy would probably less likely approach because he knows that the guy wouldn't care about hitting him.
But that's
I do like you were saying how Jesus was a good balance. I never thought about it that way, but if you just look at Jesus' interactions with both men and women, he was really able to speak to both of their hearts. If you think about the women that he spoke to, and then they followed him, and the men obviously had disciples that followed him, and how he wept and how he was grieved. Just sort of the emotional part of him that was always present. It's always present in the scriptures, but kind of the strong sort of side of him too. And it's just a wonderful picture of how to be sort of a great integration of both. And he didn't try to hide sort of those things that he was.
Yeah, we missed that. We screwed up. That's why one of the biggest things like happening. One of the things that's grown up in a lot of churches now is mixed martial arts. Guys getting together, fighting each other in the church. Yeah, like fight clubs in churches because Jesus was a man, damn it. And then it's like muscle bound Jesus. As we take this like bad. Oh yeah, like Jesus was a warrior Jesus. Like, no, yeah, he built things. Started. Let's build tree houses.
Make some furniture.
That's probably good with Connor. Go lightly on your ideas.
That's exactly. It's like, okay, it's great. We want to recover this idea, like the church has realized, not always, it's skewed its understanding of Jesus, but it can just go so far off in the wrong direction. Be like, oh man, you miss it. Violence. No, that's because that's not what a man's about. A man is not about violence. Like acting doesn't mean violence.
Yeah, I think it's like that book said, most guys are trained from the time they're little, like, this is what you're made for, to fight. So they're always looking for that, and when they don't get it, they're like, you lied to me, where's the fight?
Yeah.
Now you're trying to get me to be emotional, and that was the thing he said was really interesting, that men have distanced themselves so much, because he said, like Bernard Shaw was in Iraq, And they asked him, well, how did you deal with it every night? He said, I just remained objective. I distanced myself, did not get emotionally involved. And the guy was like, how sad is it? But he's like, that's what men have to do on a daily basis. They're taught, and if I have to kill this guy, I can't feel about it. I gotta compart. I gotta anger here, fear here. I can't tap into all these. I gotta take them out. And I can't be like, oh, what if he has a family? But there was this, speaking of that, if you guys ever read this book by Rob Bell called Sex God, he had this one story where it was like, this is related to empathy. He said it was like an American unit that had captured a Taliban or something, and they told them all to stand over there, and one of the soldiers was keeping an eye out. And so then this one Taliban guy kept getting out of line, and they were like, get back in line. But he just kept doing it, and then finally they were like, all right, what is the deal? And he was like, please, give this note to my father if I don't make it home alive. And he said like the commanding officer on the American side had to turn around and hide his tears or something, because he said, this guy didn't know, but I had issues with my father as well. And so he said, sometimes the strongest two words in all of human languages are the words me too. Just that idea of empathy. So I think that kind of goes back to the idea too that instead of trying to teach men to be empathetic, like we got to first show them the empathy,
And
then
don't do that
yeah.
a lot of the time.
Because I know we don't have time to expound on everything, but as I do more writings, the thing I want to make sure to like drive home is like we're not bashing men. We're not, because I think it comes across like that. Man, you're just linear and you don't empathize, and what's wrong with you? And you're not loving. You're just a robot. They're like, okay, I guess I am. So I'll continue to be heartless.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so instead of saying, hey, guess what? We feel you. We understand you. Like, what must it be like to be inside of you? And then start from there.
I was reading, men want significance. Women want security.
Whoa, that is really a generalization.
What is that? Bias?
You're hitting all of Laura Jean's buttons.
I know. I'm sorry. I didn't realize we were
That's
talking
not
about
true?
gender
Is that
today.
true?
It makes me a little-
I would have prepped
like
myself.
It's not true.
not true?
I want significance
Security.
much more than I want security.
Really?
That's
Significance
stereotyping
and
people.
security.
Like
Well, in
it's
general,
saying men
I
don't
think
want
in
security and
general.
women don't.
I think we all want the same things. It's just how you arrive
Let's
at
be
it.
honest.
Like we want love, but we don't want the same kind of love that you want. Like
Yeah, I
don't-
take that idea lightly. I go with Tom.
So, relationships, maybe in relationships that applies, I don't know.
I think we have been raised to be a certain way.
Well, I think that being wanted is a form of significance, perhaps. I think that's something that, as far as I can tell, is core to women, is the desire to be wanted.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I think that's core to human to
Yeah.
want to be like not rejected.
Yeah.
Just like what he was saying.
But not just not rejected, but
and to
wanted.
be wanted.
It's not the same.
I mean,
as
do you
rejected.
not want to be wanted?
I do, but I think it's
just to.
That's not a core desire for me, I'll say.
it's not.
And I'm female, so
Okay.
so I think just making those generalizations,
Yeah.
you're saying, well, because you're female, that should be your core, and if it's not, there's sort of something wrong with you. Maybe you're a little bit too manly, or or if I turned to you and was like, well, if you're not tough enough, then there's something wrong with you. You're a little bit too girly. Like you need to fix
Yeah.
that. That's harmful to people. That messes up people's lives.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Allows
Definitely.
a lot of violence to persist.
Well, I think you can use it as a
It is
roadmap.
serious.
I think you have to use it as a roadmap, and then when you meet the person, then you have to say, okay, this is a woman.
All right, have a
She
good
probably
one.
has different needs than the way that I think a man thinks. But then find that unique masterpiece woman.
I think every person.
Well, yeah, person.
Right. I mean, shouldn't you just approach any new person and be like, well, they might think differently than me, but I'm going to try to understand.
Yeah, but I think
So why do we put it into
I think you
gender?
have to have the universal as a roadmap.
See you guys.
Because I think the detriment is to go too far the other way. Like you can generalize or you can just specify everything too. Because I think there is, like he's saying in the book, there's universal emotions that run throughout the human race. So I think I always use the analogy of, okay, if I was a planner of a city concert and the demographic is mostly black, I could try to be all progressive and I'm so.
Generalizations that are just true.
But
Yeah.
it's cultural, though. It's not necessarily
But-
born into
But yeah, but I'm
something.
saying I think you use those as a roadmap. Like if I'm doing a demographic that's mostly black, I could try to be progressive and be like, oh, well, everybody likes different things. But the bottom line is, if I bring Kenny Chesney, I'm probably not going to be hired again. I mean, just being honest. Not to say that black people can't like country, and not to say that all black people like rap. But if I'm going to throw a dart at one thing, I'm going to point it at Lil Wayne instead of Kenny Chesney. But every black person I meet on the street, I'm going to be like, hey, you got the new Lil Wayne? And I think that's what's disrespectful. You like the Lil Wayne album?
Yeah,
it's like,
it's
don't
assuming.
don't address me as the mass.
It
But
is culture, but we don't exist without culture.
I mean,
Completely
culture's
don't.
still,
Yeah,
it's
with
still a
gender
product
it's different
of
from
human
race though,
beings.
because
I mean,
you can
can't
choose
fully
to
separate
change
culture.
it. I mean, you can choose to change it with like
I mean, I
cultural
think-
divisions of the race
I-
too, but I think our goal is to change it, and so that's why we have to say it's not what you're born with. Like you can change it.
I think
you
it's
know?
both though, because I mean I do think there is culture, but I
You're
do
born
think
with some stuff, yeah.
But I do think God created the human race with certain attributes coming through certain races on the earth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean I think it's obvious that certain races
Yeah.
have certain
That's
strengths. and-
absolutely
Cultures
true.
I think I agree.
It's-
norms
It's
and-
apparent in our looks. Certain
Yeah.
attributes are
Yeah.
specific to.
Like what type of thing?
You mean in our looks?
Yeah, like what do you mean by that? I was sorry.
You
it's a
looking
new
for
idea
me,
for
and if somebody see me, I was characteristically black. My lips are bigger, my nose are bigger.
Oh, I thought you were saying that like
No,
things about us that
characteristics.
are more than just
Oh,
physical.
the
Oh, I think so
I said
too.
it's apparent in our physical, but it's also apparent in
I
our
think
versus
so.
I would say there's a number of generalizations I have about black people universally, but we're probably more, I would say, theatrical in a sense and in tune with music, way more than
More
a lot of other
expressive.
cultures.
Black culture is way more
Yeah.
expressive than white culture.
Exactly.
In
That's
America,
where I
at
think
least,
it's way more expressive,
Yeah.
and that is universal. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But just
Yeah.
like saying it, it's just expressive. I don't know. It's here. It's now. Everywhere I've seen black people is more expressive. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. It's sort of a generalization. Not all black people are expressive,
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah.
that God has made us male and female, and there's certain things that are more male and certain things that
Yeah.
are more female. But I
Otherwise
don't
it'd
think
be the
that we
same.
should, right. I don't think that we should try to fit each other into these one dimensional.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem in society. But
Yeah.
there are things that are
difference
more
without pigeonholing someone.
right. But I
Yeah,
think that we need
just
to do
accept
there
them.
is gender, and there are things that are more male, and there are things that are more female.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But I think that sort of like you said, hold these things lightly. We
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
have a skewed idea of what masculinity and what femininity is, and those need to be integrated in some way. And
Yeah.
some of those characteristics are more male and more female, and how do we look at those in a different light, as opposed to saying, I just don't, and this is sort of a race thing, like people that say they're colorblind, I'm just like, that's ridiculous. That's not what people of color want to hear. Like, I want you to see me, like I'm African American, I love that. That's not an attribute I don't want you to see. But I mean, that's just something that I don't want you to just see and discriminate against me. So I think that, you see me as a woman, I may or may not be more empathetic. I have breasts. I have the ability to mother and care in a way that probably a man would not. I don't not want you to see those things and call them a woman because, Adam looked at Eve and saw something very different from himself and he said, what am I going to better? He honored that as opposed to. And I think there's a difference between saying I am a woman and all of those things and, my spectrum of, masculinity and femininity is different depending on, how I grew up and what woman I am. But I am a woman and I want to revel in that. I want you to enjoy the fact of woman being different and completely other from a man and sort of highlight that and revel in that as Adam did when he looked at Eve. And not being afraid of those characteristics, but not just saying that's what a woman is.
Right.
That's what a man is.
Yeah.
I think that's where we get into
Right,
the
and
problem.
I think that's beautiful what you just said, that Adam looked at Eve and said, flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone. He didn't try to define her. He just knew that she was the exact same as him, without.
Well,
with her
they were of the
differences.
same essence,
Yeah.
but she
With
was
her
different.
differences.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He saw
Yeah.
her differences as the same.
Like, this is something.
So he didn't define her,
I like that, yeah.
Yeah, isn't that
Yeah.
beautiful?
Yeah. I mean, the thing for me is that, when I see something and see it as particularly feminine or particularly of one culture or one ethnicity, like when I see something like that, I don't say, okay, that's not what I am, therefore I don't want to be like that. It's pretty easy to see, growing up in going to public schools at CHS, that there's certainly, distinct cultures going on there. But the thing is, I can look at black culture at CHS and see like this expressiveness, this like more openness about things that like I want to be more like. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's not like I want to be part of the black culture specifically, but like I see that and I'm like, I miss that a lot, and I recognize that partly because I'm white, partly because of different things that are particular to my family, but different reasons, like, you know, like maybe my upbringing hasn't been that expressive, and I'd like to be more expressive, you know what I mean? Or I might see something that is more like a feminine trait, like empathy or something, and like see the value of that, and want to be more empathetic, you know, completely separate from whether that's a feminine trait or not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think it's still good to recognize dichotomies. I mean, I do think like God gave us dichotomies for a reason, so that we could see the other side, like so that we had people on different sides of something in order to give fullness to something. Like, you know, if I look at something from one side of the spectrum, or somewhere on one side of the spectrum, there's going to be someone else who sees it from another side, and when you have those together, like, you get a better picture of the way things are. But if you just have like, if there's no like distinction between the two, if it's all just kind of like whatever, you know what I mean? If it's all kind of like, if you don't have that separation from the middle, if you don't have some sort of like movement away, like almost like some potential energy, then you're not really going to get a clear understanding of things. You know what I mean? Like I think there's a necessity to recognize those dichotomies too. You know, I think they're really important. I think it's awesome that we have like a predominant Eastern and Western culture too. I think that's really cool personally. Like, I have a really strong interest in China. I mean, China's kind of like their quintessential like Eastern culture or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think that definitely hold them lightly. You know, like I said before, definitely hold them lightly.
I'm never going to forget that phrase.
Hold them lightly.
Mm-hmm.
I know. The problem is that the majority of Americans don't hold it lightly.
Yeah.
And that's why when he started talking about his dad teaching him how to be a man, I was like, Gah! Because like generally in American culture that means like be tough, be aggressive.
Yeah.
You have to play football. You have to like shut down your emotions. Like, don't be whipped by a girl. You know, like all those types of things are what most people think is American, and they do not hold it lightly. They will fight to the death, and there are plenty of nasty things that moms teach their daughters, right? Like, that are really nasty.
And they're, like I said, they're a generation behind, right? Because, you know, the dad was teaching what he learned in his generation, but the son has to live among different folks with different perspectives.
Right, and it's hard. But, so I guess that's why, like, it's just tough, because it's like, but people don't take it lightly. Yeah. And they don't even realize what they're doing half the time. But if you do, like, say, well, why is that? They're just like, that's just how it is. Because it makes the world a better place.
And you're like, man, because I'm a woman.
Right, yeah, I want to be. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I'll send out some links of like one article, like Evan was talking to us, this article that my friend sent me is like, you know, why is there no men in the church, and kind of how it thinks the church is sort of, you know, emasculated men. Yeah. And then...
But what does it mean to emasculate men to you? Like, what do you personally mean by that?
I mean, I think it's expecting that... I don't know, I have to think about that.
I think Wild at Heart speaks pretty good.
Oh, that
pretty good
so
way of
Why does it
looking at
make you angry?
Because it's about men when it should be about humans.
But see, I think that's the
because I relate to so much in that book as a female.
But they wrote one to captivate it. I think this is what Connor's kind of getting. This is kind of my thing too. It's like, I think we're so afraid of also identifying, like he's saying, differences, because we're so, like, there's this one comedian, he's like, man, he's like, white people, he's like, we got so politically correct that we're afraid to even call black people black. He's like, so my friend came up to me and was like, hey man, did you see John? He's like, oh, what did he look like? You know, he was tall. He's like, no, but like, what do you look like? He had on, he was kind of a shade. It was like black, yeah, black. You know, it's just like this fear of like seeing people and be like, this is what you are, but like maintaining balance of like not, because I think, because then if you don't have, it's like, what's the point of calling? It's like, what's the point of having differences? We just might as well have an all male or all female if you don't eventually say, look, this is the dividing line. Not dividing in the bad way, but I think it's the difference. I think it's synonymous with autonomy and being in collaboration. You know, you have to have your sense of self and your own boundary. And so when you come into a group, you're like, this is the me I've created to make this. It's like the pixel that makes the picture. Like you have to have the defining edges of the pixel to create the picture of the whole. Or otherwise there will be no picture because everybody will just blur together. I mean, eventually you're supposed to blur together, but not in the way that loses you. So I mean, I think we have to also, I think the political correctness makes it so much that people can't even say that this, thing is this anymore.
Well, all I'm saying is not that he wasn't politically correct, but what I'm saying is that he was wrong. That's not just, all those things about needing adventure and all those things are not just masculine,
But I think
they are human.
Yeah, but I think you have to read
and
it in context
too.
too.
And I felt very offended by not being included in that message.
Loving adventure, that sounds like me.
Right,
But I think,
me too.
But I think the problem is the man needs his way of understanding that, and the woman needs her way. Like you're saying, we're different, right? So like a woman.
We're not different in those ways, though.
But we all seek adventure in different ways. Based
on our individual personalities, not because of our gender.
But your gender is a part of who you are.
We're raised. Okay, sorry, not our sex though. Not our gender. Yes, is culturally developed. So yes, we do end up acting different because people have raised us differently. But as far as our innate characteristics, I don't think very much of it is innate.
Because I was a tomboy.
Yeah.
And I had Hot Wheels.
Yeah.
Stuff. My parents let me have cars because I liked cars, but I'm a very feminine woman.
Right.
Yeah.
At the same time. But my interests are, I had a lot of male friends growing up, and I still do. And I always liked playing with boys better.
Yeah.
Because they just play. The women chattered too much for me. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of have like what you would call almost a male brain too. But my femininity is intact. So the things that you probably think are adventurous, I like the types of things. I would rather hang around with a guy and go do those kinds of things and not talk so much.
I guess I'm just confused as to why you get offended at the book.
Because
as if
it's about men only.
But what's wrong with having a book? I mean, there's a men-only bathroom and a women-only bathroom.
Not for different reasons, though.
But why not just combine all the bathrooms? We're all the same.
A lot of places are doing that are sort of aware of current feminist theology.
Yeah, but I'm like, you're saying like
yes,
the book,
we can do that
but the way you speak about the book as if it's okay if it's.
Well, I don't like captivating either. If that makes you happy.
All right.
It offends me because I don't see it as.
We'll intersect like race into the picture because I have friends like we talk about this in my drama group like where it's like what is the question? What is whiteness? Like that's something that's not really addressed as much because it's like traditionally white is like the majority, and then black people are clear like you were African American, like there's your spot, and you were Chinese, and so it's like, this one guy, me and my friend got in a conversation with a guy in the dorm once, and he was just like, had the Confederate flag, and he was just like, how come I can't have a white rally? And it's obvious he can't have a white rally because white rallies usually mean KKK. Right. But he was really honest, like, I'm a white person, I want to celebrate my white pride, and we don't like to hear that because we think white people, oh, you own America, but like, why can't he have a white rally?
And why assume it's KKK?
Yeah, so why, it's like similar, like the guy, white people want to have something, black people, like everybody wants to have something for their culture, something just for themselves, and I don't think that's wrong.
Their race.
Yeah, culture. I think we all
share culture. All of us share the same American culture, but we're different.
But I do think there's black culture. I think
different subcultures, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? The greater culture is our American culture.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think there's a balance of blend. I think you have to have autonomy and individualism. Like there's certain things that Bernard will only enjoy for Bernard. You will never understand them. And I need a book for me, and for you to come up to me and say, well, why? I was offended at your Bernard book. I like this stuff too. It's like, this is for me. I think there's something okay.
That's different though. Because that individual stuff is so different from grouping people and lumping them into a big lump and saying, this is how all of these people are. So basically we're implying that all these other people aren't like that. And they just don't get it.
I think you also have to factor in the fact that the book is written as sort of a counter to something that's happening. So he was saying like there are lots of men, they're in desk jobs, they feel emasculated, like they want to go out and have adventure in the woods. Boys used to hunt in the woods, and now they're in a desk job.
We're talking about Wild at Heart.
Yeah. So I think you also have to consider that there's certain books that are written.
So are females not also at desk jobs and want to be out there like adventurous too?
But it's speaking directly to men. That's what it's speaking.
But
to.
that's my
It's
problem, is
almost
that
like-
it's speaking about something that's human, but saying, well, this is only for men now.
But John
No,
Eldridge
but
has
it's
to
like
speak
a
to the people who he
medicine.
can speak to.
He can't
And
speak to
speaks
women? We're that different
But
that we
what-
can't
isn't
speak
it
to
like
each
a
other?
medication? It's a
Why
medication.
just let him have an audience? Let him have an
He
audience.
can speak to you, but it's probably going to be different. Like, if I was having a women's conference and I stood up and I was like, okay, ladies, I'm going to talk about eyeliner. Like, if I'm going to talk about...
Okay, whoa, stereotyping.
No, okay. See, like, we can't
Pregnancy.
even...
Yeah, but wasn't
Yeah,
it,
pregnancy.
wasn't it sort of like the book is sort of a medicine?
Pregnancy
for men,
is only
right?
female. That's a body
I know, but what
thing.
if I want to talk about it? We're all the same.
You can. If you're a doctor and you've really studied and you're an expert, okay.
I know, but you're probably going to listen to a woman much... If you were having an intimate conversation with women right now, and I just came and got... Ooh, what are we talking about? You're probably going to feel very uncomfortable because...
If you had a wife or a sister and you had been involved in her pregnancy, I would be
No, not
interested.
pregnancy. Just tonight, if we had a group of women and you guys started talking about very intimate things, and then I just pulled up a chair and started listening.
If you were also a close friend, yeah, then that would be fine.
Very intimate stuff. Like the most intimate
Like
thing.
body stuff, different.
Everything.
Body
No.
stuff is different. 'Cause that is
Like,
different between male and female.
No, everything about relationships, your marriage, your sex life.
Yeah, to me,
You're not going to feel awkward if a guy is sitting in the
sex life is also different.
Why? We're all the same.
There would just
We
have
all
to be
have.
people who are
We all are
close.
able to have sex.
It would just have to be people who are close.
You just named two.
But my
different
close guy
things.
friends,
Why
yeah.
do you get to say these things are different? These things.
Our bodies are different. Our minds and how we live in the world is only different so far as culture makes it different.
So then do not. I mean.
I mean, there might be some things, but we just never know for sure.
So, I guess I'm a little. You're saying like it feels like you're saying that there are certain things that are exclusive that this is appropriate for a woman-only conversation.
Well, yeah, because in our culture, sex, you generally do just talk about single gender or the person that you're having it with. So that's cultural, though. That's not, like, innate. Like, my vision would be for a culture. I mean, that's a big problem in our culture, actually, because men learn about sex from other men and women learn about sex from other women. And so it is so difficult. And, sorry, I teach about this, so it's really easy for me to talk about. So in, like, coming together and, like, you have sex with someone who's of the opposite sex, so, like, you've learned from totally different parts of the world, and coming together is so difficult for so many couples to actually do it in a healthy way because they've learned in such different spheres. But yeah, I'm still stuck in that cultural bubble where I would probably not talk about it tons with guys if it was personal.
I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not necessarily sex is an example, but there are things that are like women-only conversations, and there are things that are men-only conversations.
In our culture, yes.
And
It shouldn't be that way.
But why shouldn't?
Right.
Why should we have things that are
Because
just?
we're so divided that we just like abuse
But it's
each
not.
other.
It's not division in the sense that
yeah,
you
it's
don't.
You can have division and still have collaboration at the same time. I
Right.
think that you can have times for each one. Isn't there a time for one, a time for another? I mean, Ecclesiastes. There's
Yeah.
times to be divided. There's times to come together. There's times to destroy. There's times to create.
Yeah.
There's all these different things.
I just
There's
think that
different
we
times for
like
it.
lay on so many expectations. So it's like, yeah, sure, that's fine. We could have different times for different things or whatever. But the fact that we devise so much along those lines, especially within the church, and the fact that we make all these assumptions and it's not just like dividing so that you can like have your comfortable conversation. It's a lot more than that in our culture. So it's.
I don't even think it's cultural though. I think it's universal that sometimes, for me personally, I believe it's regardless of culture. Sometimes I just want to be around guys and
Yeah.
no women. And
So
sometimes I
that's
really
what-
want to spend
Because
time with a lot of different
so
people.
that's
they
what
get
that
you and they're
book
more
was
like
doing,
you,
right?
or like.
Not exactly. No, because sometimes I just
Why
want
is
to
that?
hang out with
You need, like,
guys.
masculine
I just
energy.
want to hang out with
I
guys.
think you gotta-
without,
Right, but the reason
I don't
is
think
that
it's culture.
you can relate better, right? I mean, that's often when we
Yeah,
want to be
and I
around
think
people who are
that's
like
universal,
us.
not just cultural.
Oh, I agree. I think
Okay.
we need our little spaces where we can be with people who are like us. I think that's really important to being human. But I do think that part of why guys are so much different from females in our culture is that we have raised them so differently. You know, like girls might not get some of your like all guy things, and you might not get some of the all girl conversation stuff, but that's not because you were born unable to understand them or anything. It's just because your life has looked really different by being a man. You've been kept in those circles, and by being a female, we've been kept in those circles. So I mean, and it's nature versus nurture. So that conversation, you will never find the answer to that. Who knows what the truth is, but I think we just, in our culture, we do not acknowledge that the truth is that so much of this is how we're raised, and we don't know that it's innate. You know, we have all of these claims that, yeah, it's because men are these ways, men are men, and women are women, and, you know, like, but we really don't know that.
I mean, I think some of what you're saying is true. Like, there's probably a lot of that we're already operating off of that we've just assumed is true. But I do think that the nurture comes from I think we have desires, and then out of that flows the culture. Like, I don't think there's like this or this.
Yeah, I think that they're very integrated. Absolutely, I agree. I also think that whenever you talk about culture, you like you said, really can't separate it from. You really can't separate culture from the innate things, because the innate things are derived into the culture. You know.
Yeah, I guess
like,
I just heard from parents who are like, "Oh no, my boy wants to play with dolls. What do I do? There's something so wrong with him," and so I have to like remind them, like, okay, you know. So I guess I'm just like, I'm thinking more along parental lines and like considering how you raise your kids and allowing them to be like, if your son wants to hang out with girls a lot, okay, like that's fine.
Well,
you know, like.
I mean, I've always been very different from my brothers. My brothers have always been way more masculine than me. I've always been far more feminine in general. I've always liked arts. You know, I haven't liked sports as much. I mean, I do enjoy sports. But I've just, I like talking a lot more than them. I talk way more than my brothers do. I talk more than both combined, probably. And like, you know, I can absolutely relate. Like, living in an American culture in which there is this really heavy emphasis on this sort of like very distinct picture of masculinity has always been like annoying for me and troublesome and making it hard to relate to guys a lot of time. You know what I mean? Like, you know, even going to college now, like, it's very frustrating for me a lot of the time. Trying to like really get to know other guys, because a lot of guys don't want to be known in a certain way. They just kind of want to do their own thing and sort of like because like the idea of like what you're going through, what you're struggling with, or like, you know, feelings, if you will. It's like the F word for guys. You know what I mean? That's something that like guys are afraid of. You know, and that's something that like that's something that I'm more like. That I really like appreciate and want to like get into and stuff more than the average guy does. So like, I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. I think stereotypes are definitely like not a good thing. You know what I mean? And that's why I say to take things lightly. But I definitely still feel like there's some clear like distinctions, and I mean, you could say it comes from like chemical differences or physical differences that like expand into these like mental differences and stuff. But I think they're there. You know what I mean? I do think they're there. You know, even if, and again, like, we shouldn't take them too seriously. But I think that they should be recognized.
Yeah, like a few years ago, everybody used that term "same difference," which I hated, because you would say something like "same difference." I'm like, oh yeah, I know they're different. But then I started using that to like, for my teacher, I was like, oh yeah, we're all the same, but we're also different. You know?
Yeah.
Like if you look at a man's body and a woman's body, like we all have arms, feet, legs, but then there are some specific differences that the other one doesn't have, which makes it, I mean, I think the problem is people hear different, and I think they get translated unequal.
Right.
Immediately. They think that's
synonymous with,
and it's like, instead of, like, it goes to me like the whole diversity conversation. Instead of looking at that person and be like, wow, look what they can bring to the table that I can't. I need to value that difference. They hear, why are you pointing out my difference? Versus like, no, we're pointing out your difference because we're saying it's valuable and we like this. But then I think a lot of times when people hear the truth, like there's already this pain or this lens of pain. So before it gets through, they hear the pain, like what they've gone through, and so then it's, you know, quick response versus being able to be like, okay, let me hear what this person is really saying to me.
It's funny. I think whenever you're influenced by a certain kind of thinking, like exactly what you're talking about, like I think it's a perfect example. When someone is different and they get like, you know, teased for it or whatever, they feel pain for being different, right? Yeah. They begin to think this the same way that the people who are causing the pain to begin with about their difference. They think the same way about it. And it's almost like you just have to like introduce this new way of thinking about it in order to get like, you have to almost transcend that kind of like thinking.
You know what
I
it
mean?
is? It's like the salivating dog. I mean, that's a
Pavlov. Yeah.
You know, because you get conditioned
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
think that it's bad
Yeah.
because of the hot stove that burns you every time
Yeah.
you show any sensitivity. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's sad.
I think that's why I wanted to be like, you mean second wave feminism, because that was just like, that was wounded people reacting to their wounds,
Yeah.
and so it was like, well, I can do whatever I want, and whereas I feel like, since there's been a lot more freedom for us, and equality in general, we can now like step back and just think more about things and listen and have more diverse ways of viewing things. And
the other thing I think too is, speaking on this term of empathy, especially for this conversation, it's very hard to do because we just want to like, no, you change that immediately, and we have to realize that no matter what these people think, this is their current truth.
What people?
Like men, women, everybody. Like whatever people are thinking currently.
Like us.
Whether it's about gender.
All of them out there.
Whether it's sex, gender, race, like whatever we think is our current truth. And so just to like attack people's thing, like nobody wants to hear that. They want you to say like, well, you don't know why I think
Are you
this.
saying I am attacking people?
Not necessarily attacking, but I think a lot of times when things come up, it's easy to see a certain person's mindset and immediately like pick apart versus being like, okay, let's actually use empathy and like, why does this person think this?
Like for me to like when you are, well, you'd be amazed. I was sitting here for so long before saying it. Like it was like an eternity in my.
But empathy went from me to you because you see the results of the bad results. You deal with the negative, or I should say, the outcome of the outcome of that insecure mentality of the people who aren't secure in their roles. I think that has a lot to do with those extreme cases, where a woman is not completely in touch with or has respect for her own femininity, and the man is insecure about his masculinity. She's insecure about her femininity. He's insecure, and then the two insecure people get together and they do damage to each other.
Well, actually, I work with sexual assault, so that's actually.
Oh, I thought you were. I thought it was like physical abuse, but yeah, that's even.
Well, I think physical abuse, is often one way too, but sexual assault is definitely one person hurting the other.
Right.
And it's not always a man hurting a woman; it's anyone hurting another person. But.
Yeah, but I know that's. Like I said, I was empathetic towards what you must have to hear and see and deal with.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to like jump on people. I think it's been a hard week too. I think I might start crying. It's been a really, really, really.
I don't think you're attacking people. I'm just very struck by this.
It's so hard for me to hear people sing.
I'm just kind of struck by this idea that you think you're offended by Wild at Heart. That image just stays with me. I mean, I think part of it too is kind of like, like Connor was saying, like sometimes he just wants to be with men. And since we both have that masculine and feminine within us, I think, you can only get filled up on the masculine side by masculine energy, Like, so then when you come back together, like, like Shatana's like, then when you come back with feminine energy, like you're whole now. Like I can't get masculine energy from you. Like you could try to give it to me all you want, but I'm never going to get it because that's what you exude is feminine energy. So I think there's.
I don't really know what masculine and feminine energy
I mean, I think it's very abstract at this moment. I think. I mean, I don't know what that means, but it's just being able to look at somebody who has. I mean, maybe it's like you said, maybe it's testosterone and estrogen, partially. I mean, but I think there's some spiritual thing that's masculine. I mean, I didn't get to all those charts, but
energy is masculine.
Yeah. Physical, emotional, and spiritual. Like we have all three of those.
Whatever, yeah.
And I think like exactly like she's saying, if you come together with this insecure person and this insecure person, you're just making a mess. So there's certain things I can only get from Dad. I can only talk to dad and feel like dad gets me. You know, if I try to get that from mom, it's just not gonna turn out right. You know, I think you just have to have like and like come together, because in essence, in the end, it's not even, like you're saying, it's not even about masculine or feminine. It's about who are you as an individual person created by God to come together with another person if you're gonna come together. Like if you don't have that wholeness about who you are together before you come with that other person, it's like you can't get that from that other person.
And that's where the problem lies, I think, is when we try to get something from the other person. You know, that we're not whole.
See, to me, the problem is people trying to grasp at a certain set of stereotypes that they feel like they need to fill. Like, I need to be a man, you know, or I need to feel feminine, you know, or whatever. I see those things really tearing people down. This need to, like, reach some strange goal of, like, the person that fits perfectly in that box or that bubble. Like, and...
Do I not need to be a man?
No, I don't know. Well, it depends on what you mean by that, because people mean different things. But to me, I don't know. I don't feel like there's some, like, goal out there of some, like, list of things that you need to be just because you were born with the body of a male.
I didn't say anything about a list of things, or I'm just saying that there's something fundamental. Like, it is important for me to embody the role of manhood. So I need to be a man. I don't think that the problem is somebody saying I need to be a man. I think the problem is, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by a man? And one of the things that kept coming back to me, and we talk about masculinity, particularly in our culture, especially that story, and the guy sort of pushing around his girlfriend, and that the men sort of step aside. And I think we learn from our fathers and our role models what we're supposed to be as a man, but it's false. And we spend our whole lives trying to be that. And usually it's not until we have our own sons, and we don't have anything better to teach them than what we were taught about what it means to be a man. And we teach our sons the same lie. And we spend, and I think in male culture, and I can't say whether or not this is true in female culture, but I feel that particularly in male culture, there's a lot of posturing. There's a lot of, this is what I'm supposed to be as a man. This is what I need to present myself as a man. And so much of us, like, this is what everybody's told me I have to be, and I've tried and tried and tried, and I can't do it. I'm literally unable to become this thing that I'm supposed to be. And then we feel desperate, and we feel impotent, and we feel like a failure inside because we're trying to be something that's impossible. And so in that sense, there's this sort of idea of, like, this guy's muscling around his girlfriend, and I walk by and I say, I should do something. I should intercede, or I feel like, but I don't know how to do it. I'm afraid that I'm incapable of actually being effective. And I think when you say, I think it's important for us to say, I need to be myself. Part of who I am is a man, and so I need to be a man. But what is my definition of a man? And if I just keep drawing from a fallen, sinful culture, I'm going to be destroying myself. I need to have a new, reborn image of what a man is, which is
human, maybe?
Father God.
Well, see, to me, the better question than how can I be a man, or how could I be a woman, like we could ask ourselves. Who does? But I'm sure that plenty of girls do. But maybe less consciously. But to me, the better question is, what does it mean to be human? Like, what does it mean to be Christian? What does it mean to be a human being who has fallen and then has been redeemed or reshaped in Christ? Like, what does it mean to live? And I think if two humans come together then in a relationship, it's a lot healthier than two people who are like, wait, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? How do I go after these, like, culturally created ideals? Like,
I agree with what you're saying, but I'm a carpenter. So every day I go into work. what does it mean to be a carpenter? How am I going to do my fulfill my role in my job and be the best carpenter I can be? So, what does it mean to be human is a big, broad question.
Yeah, it is.
But I'm also asking, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be a carpenter? I mean, I am a diversity of things. So sometimes I'm asking big, universal questions, like what does it mean to be human? And I can be connected with everyone else who's human. And sometimes I'm asking simple, often more pragmatic questions, like what does it mean to be a carpenter?
Right.
And so I think that there's that scope, and within that, part of who I am is, and ultimately, what does it mean to be me? And part of who I am is a human, a man, an American, carpenter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And how do I be the most myself?
I guess to me, like being a carpenter or, a lot of those things are a role, and to me, why does gender have to be a role? It's unhealthy when it's a role.
Because you build to that, because like you're talking about the top of the mountain being human and being what God wants me to be is way up here. But then we attain that by climbing up, by attaining a grasp of the lower level things.
To me, human isn't like this high mountain thing or big broad. To me, human is like who does God want me to be, and that allows you to be more specific.
I think also, like I sent you this talk that this guy is called like "Is There Sex in Heaven?" and he goes through like how the words sex and gender over time have even changed to be confused. If one gender was never used, and you would look on the application and be like sex, male, female. But I think that's the thing you also have to look at when you look at Genesis. It's, like that's the thing that's clear about God creating people. There is clearly a male and clearly a female. Like that's one universal thing you can look around. There is no, Kurt's talking about carpenter. There's no other thing really like that where I can say, oh, well, this guy's carpenter and there is to a degree, but that one is clearly laid out. Like you don't look in the Bible like, and God created carpenter and He created creative.
Carpenter is what the man does, or what the woman does.
Whereas, and I mean, he gets into the idea of like, what does this then also mean about who God is? God's quote unquote sexuality, kind of, the two. So I think, not that all that defines you, but you can't leave that out because it's clearly set in the beginning. Like God made male and He made female, so He made it. Obviously, for some reason, that there is something in each, and it does need to be recognized separately. And that separateness doesn't necessarily mean that there's division. It's just there's difference, and the two can come together because the two, will be made one flesh.
And I wanted to ask you, do you think that book can get into the hands of men that will handle it honorably?
Which book?
The book, what is that?
Wild at Heart.
Wild at Heart.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
I think
so. There are some men that really will handle it responsibly, and it will really bolster who they are and make them better men towards women. I've never read the book.
Well, that's not my
But
concern.
you know what I'm saying? It could be that it's in the hands of good men, right?
I guess my concern is not developing those things in women. My concern is not that like, oh no, men are going to do this, but more just that it's like, oh, but women don't really. I mean, they have their own different thing, and it's just not true.
I mean, some of the things in the book he talks about, like he says, like guys, they want this beauty to rescue. Like they want to be the hero to save the girl. Like
I want to be a hero plenty of times. I don't want to save. I don't have like some specific dream of saving a girl because no one planted that in my head when I was growing up. But like. It's just
I don't think that's just.
Is that true? Were you saying that that's not true?
I don't think that's. Well, I'm just saying like.
For you, it's not true.
I would say it's true. I don't think it's just
You're
all
saying
cultural.
It's not universal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not human necessarily. That.
To want to be heroic.
No, the idea of rescuing beauty.
Yeah.
In the heroic idea of that particular heroism.
Well, wait, but by beauty you mean the female? Because I would love to rescue beauty in like music or art or.
Yeah, I mean, we could get all like philosophical.
I'm trying to figure out when you say beauty, you mean female?
I think he's talking about a woman. He said
because that is sort of. That bothers me too. But
I knew it would.
I mean, how can you just? I mean, that's so objectifying. But anyway, Yeah,
We
so
need to
I
have a
mean-
whole symposium.
Yeah, I guess it's just.
It sounds to me like what you're most frustrated with is having gender in terms of being a role, in terms of being something that defines a person, as being too much defining a person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't think what you really want, I really don't think what you really want is not having gender as a role. You just want it to be less important as a role and not made so holistically defining someone. That's what it sounds like to me.
I would be
Where-
content with that.
Yeah, to where
Let's be content with it.
it's forcible.
It's still part of who you are. It's still part of who you are. Just like being a carpenter, just like
It
being
is.
black. or
Yeah, because
white.
kind of like what he was saying, like what I was trying to say tonight, is like he says, look at the movies, like a Braveheart. He's saying like these are just echoes of what we really feel deep inside of us. Like when you see the movie of the guy coming to rescue her, it's not like.
Well, they were made by men.
I know, but no, he's. Here's the thing. I think like your nurture nature thing. Like I always get frustrated when people say like, well, boys are so revved up on hormones because there's all these images of women on billboards. Like no, people put women images on billboards because they know guys are attracted visually.
In
to it.
India, they put lots of naked men on billboards, actually. So I don't
Okay.
think a lot of these things we think are universal are just because we're in America and we don't know much about other cultures.
But I don't think we do things like. I think things exist because we have natural desires.
I'm
and
sure
make them.
that's-
So I
I'm
think
sure
what
that's partly
he's
true.
saying, like in the movies where you see the guy rescuing the girl, he's saying these are coming out from larger, deeper like sources, and they just kind of like we see these movies.
Among
It's just like a
historical
little,
traditions.
like you look at this as like a pixel in like what our truest desires are as men.
Yeah.
Like you see a guy rescuing a girl, it's like, yeah, then it gets turned into all this other stuff that people make it. But he's saying ultimately, like when you see a guy rescuing and moving a girl, that speaks to something in a guy that he wants to rescue something beautiful. Specifically, I think, yes, in the context of guy, girl, it would be a woman. Like I don't see beauty in rescuing a cat. That doesn't like make my heart like, oh, I want to save the day and this cat, and then this cat's gonna come hug me. There is a sexual thing that happens between a man and a woman that makes that, appealing. You rescue
That
the
requires
woman.
women being in danger all the time. If you're going to make it specific about men have this deep desire to rescue women specifically, then that would mean that women need to be in danger all the time and need to be rescued, which is
Not
really stinky for women.
I wouldn't say that because I know sometimes like they say that, and I don't know if this may not be true, this is a stereotype, that when a woman has a problem, that the man's focus is logic. I mean, his focus comes from logic, and he tries to solve it when she really just wants emotion. She just wants to vent, and she just wants that emotional support. That's an element of rescue, of let me solve your problems. So it could be as small as this and as big as keep, pulling her from danger, I think.
I mean, another thing I forgot to mention, but he's like in the book, he talks about, Eve ate from the tree and Adam was just kind of like standing there. Like his job, he was commissioned by God with like, don't eat from the tree. And then, the wife eats from the tree and he's supposed to be there like saying, no, look, serpent, no, leave.
Yeah.
Like this is like, but he did nothing. So that idea of protector,
I'm just, everyone's sort of getting ready to leave. But
Yeah.
I'm not, so I'm just going to ask another question.
I'll stand up
As we take a few steps and then we turn around and listen, and then we take a few steps.
Thanks for shouting it out. It helps me to.
I want to hear the question. How about you?
Yeah.
well, I'm still recording if you guys just want to
Oh my
listen.
gosh.
No, this is all going on. It's all relevant.
I mean, while we're on the subject of rescuing beauty, I'm curious at what your thoughts were earlier when there was discussion about, like, when Ebony was traveling around the world and she has this sense of need for security. And I feel like some of the other women, I don't remember if you chimed in or not, but I feel like a lot of the women in the room are agreeing that there's something that they all share about this deep need for a sense of security that men just don't get.
Yeah, in my experience, it's not a need for security, it's a fear.
Right. It's
Okay.
a need for
Because-
protection.
Yeah, it's a fear because right now in our current society, 1 in 4 women will be raped at some point in their life. That is 25%, that is epidemic. And a less known statistic is that 1 in 8 guys will also be raped at some point in their life. So, while guys could have almost as much of a fear, the way that our society presents it is that women are the ones in danger and need to be afraid.
It's going to be the same in other cultures too.
And it's the same in a lot of cultures. Yeah, exactly.
In just about all cultures.
It's
really.
true, because that's how it's
just
seen.
it's just natural, because
Rape is
guys are
natural?
stronger. No, I'm saying it's natural that you're going to have the women that are going to be in danger more, just because men are physically stronger, because they just have like
and
more
have
the
more
opportunity
power.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So like that's going to be the case. It's like a natural extension of just the way things are. That
Of the gender issue.
Exactly. Like it's just going to be that way. Like
To
it's not
some extent, yeah.
cultural. That's not cultural.
Okay, some of it definitely is.
But you-
Not
well,
I'm
every
talking about,
culture
like,
has that
physical.
I'm
statistic.
talking,
Like
I
the
just talking about
physical.
physical. Yeah.
Oh.
You're always going to have. I mean,
There is some more
sadly,
physical
in a
strength,
sinful
that's true.
world where people just do horrible things like rape people, that's what's going to happen. You know, it's going to. That's the way it is.
Right, but actually men are more often the victims of male violence, actually. But it's less publicized in our culture, actually.
Yeah, but then you know what?
And it's seen as less of a problem because they're men, so they should be able to handle it.
But the point is,
which
bigger people are going to
cultural.
physically dominate smaller people.
Right.
And statistically, in general, men are bigger than women.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
but
but
men
I'm
are
just-
also bigger than some men. too.
Exactly.
Right.
So a lot
Yeah,
of men get hurt too. All I'm talking about is that there is a fear that women have that men don't have because women have been told you're in danger pretty much any time. Like when I walk out to my car, I'm going to have to think about I'm walking alone in the dark. But the reality is, I mean, statistically in America, you're more in danger in your own home with someone that you thought you trusted. But for women, not for men. Men are actually more in danger when they're out in the dark because they're much more likely to get jumped by some male that's walking around wanting to jump on somebody. But
Thank you very much as I walk out into the dark.
yeah, you're less in danger. You're less
Would you
in
like me
danger.
to walk you out? I have a
I'm
knife.
just right, because you're so nasty.
See, really, you're going to need that to protect yourself because you're more in danger in this situation. But that's that's why I was nodding with Ebony, is that, yeah, we do have this fear, even though men are equally, if not more, in danger. So, so that's for why I was nodding. I don't know why the other women were nodding. I can't speak for them.
I didn't really notice who was nodding, but I felt like there was a consensus amongst the women in the group that there is a concern, a deeper concern that women have for their own safety that men don't have. Is that, in your opinion, purely cultural?
I don't know.
Or is that
I
all
can't
is that
say.
all
I mean, in
nurture?
my opinion, yeah, I guess I would believe that it's mostly cultural. But I mean, I'm not going to say I know. All I want is for people not to say that they know. You know, that it's definitely how we're born. But yeah, I mean, to me, that would be cultural to the extent that, like I was saying, like men are you're supposed to be invulnerable. You're supposed to be like untouchable. Like no one can hurt you. You're the big bad man. And so men are taught like don't show your fear. Don't live in your fear. Don't let that be part of it. Whereas women are raised to be like, watch out, there's a guy hiding behind every corner. You have to come home by 10 p.m. Your curfew's different from your brother because you're more at risk. All those types of things that we're like throughout our lives. We're just raised differently to think differently about safety. Men are supposed to think that they're totally fine and safe and can take care of themselves, and women are raised to think that, oh my gosh, I'm always in danger. So to me, that would be the cultural aspect of it. But I don't know what else could also be behind it necessarily.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
to me, like my ultimate goal in a relationship is not safety and security. It is equality and love and knowing that there is somebody who is going to go through life with me as an equal and not like need to protect me all the time or rescue me from anything, but that I can also protect and rescue them as much as they do for me, and that it's not even about that. It's about growing together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. Like I said, getting back from like if we get from under the curse mentality, we would probably think more like this.
Yeah.
Where this is, but I think like you can't deny truth that there are certain things that men just have that women don't, and men, vice versa. So maybe it's not this constant like, oh, I'm protecting my wife. But I mean, there's truth also. Like we're talking about context. Like we do live in a dangerous world. I can't just deny that. Like, yeah, I'm not always like looking every corner, with a sword and a blade, like protecting you. But I do have to have this part
They
of
don't
me.
last long in our culture. They're just gonna shoot you.
But if girls aren't also acting protective, then a lot of people are getting hurt too.
I mean,
So
I think
to me that's not a gender
ultimately,
thing.
if we get at, a lot of what we're talking about is getting out of fear mentality. Like, if our whole idea is, okay, God is protecting us both, we're not living in fear, period. But at the same time, you can't deny the dark world out there and be like, oh, I'm just walking through this, typical statistically neighborhood where there's murder is guaranteed every night. Like, you got to live in truth and be like, okay, honey, this route is closed. We have to go through this street. Stick next to me. I'm not gonna be like, oh, honey, I don't need protection. You have to look at the context and also look at the fact that. So, okay.
That's not gendered though. That's just like. Because if
Well,
I were married, I would also be like to my husband, or if I were with a guy or whatever, I'd also be like to him, well, don't you walk down the alley either. You stick with me.
That's true. But ultimately, if it comes, if you're not martial arts trained or you don't have a gun, like physically speaking, who do you think is going to have to, handle the situation? Like, honestly.
A lot of guys I know would not be able to
No,
do
not
any
would or wouldn't, but who is more capable of doing it?
It just depends on who I was with.
Okay, well, in most cases, it's probably going to be the guy. That's what I'm
Probably
saying.
in most of the cases.
So I think what you were talking about earlier about how do you feel emasculated. I think guys often feel emasculated in that, like, we can't even say stuff like, well, guys are usually stronger, because I think there's this language thing. Like, you're even afraid to say what you think is true because you're afraid of getting this attack. Like, what do you mean guys are usually stronger? Everybody's equal. And it's like, I can't even say what I want.
You should get mad at all the boys that I hear say, well, women are all just weak wimps. You should be mad at them, not at the girls who are defensive, because the girls hear that all the time.
You asked me how do I feel emasculated, and I'm telling you. Like, don't tell me how I should feel. Empathize and listen to what I'm telling you I do feel. I'm telling you, you're saying how do guys feel emasculated? I think guys feel emasculated by women where they feel like they want to step up and be a man and embody power and strength and what they, even if it's not the truest God source definition that should have been from time beginning infused into us, even if it's just this idea that we have now, like, recognize, like, hey, we want to be protectors, we want to be strong, we want to do this, we're trying to figure out what it means to be a man and not be like, well, that's not what a man is. A man should be, like, you're being told.
Who's coming out and saying, well, that's not a man?
What is what I'm saying? I'm telling you, the emasculating fear that guys, I think we have is we get in these kind of conversations and we want to say certain things that we truly feel, but then when we say them, it's immediate attack on you're a chauvinist or you're wrong for thinking that or what is your problem? Especially when the guy feels like the thing he's saying, he personally, like, some guys are just, yeah, they've been taught wrong, but even those guys, to a certain degree, like, that's what their dad taught them,
Right, yeah.
But more specifically, guys who are really like, yeah, this is what I think women would want to hear, that they want to be protected and not be taken as like, oh, so you're saying we can't protect ourselves? Well, I think part of that too comes in the cultural thing of whatever the definition of man and woman is as the working definition. I think women have been taught to be more masculine. Like, Ebony was saying, like, you got to be Evan, you got to be a go-getter, and you can't take nothing from nobody. If you want a job, and like that MP3 I was listening to, the guy was saying, he's like, as a man, I want a woman to lead like a woman, whatever that means. Whatever that feminine trait is. Like, I don't want a woman to lead like a man. I want her to, he's like, that's the problem now. Like, he said, there probably would be less wars and less violence and less danger in the world if women were on the front lines with men saying, like, hey, let's use empathy, let's hold up a second, let's listen, let's not just attack, let's see what's going on. So, just
I don't know. I mean, I hear all that. There are a lot of things that catch me up, but I mean, to me it's like the whole emasculating thing. Like, you have to assume there is a certain type of thing that is masculine and is better than whatever you're being made into to feel like, oh no, I'm being emasculated. So that's why I was wondering. And I mean, I guess to me, like, yeah, if you want to be more, powerful, and I'm guessing you mean that in, like, using your power for good and stuff. I wish we would just have other terminology than this gendered stuff, because honestly, like, I would like to be more powerful too, to help the people that I wish I could help better. And I guess they're just, most of the people that I know that I find very interesting and valuable are people who transcend the lines of gender and don't get all caught up in that.
Well, that's what he said in the finish off his chapter. He said the best mind is an androgynous mind, like being able to do both.
Yeah. Yeah, and I liked what you were saying earlier. I mean, most of what you were saying, I was like, at first I was like, oh, scary words. But then,
I'm not even worried about it. I've already talked
but
to you.
I listened, and I was like, oh yeah, like that's cool that you're talking about it as concepts that we can all be. Like it's totally like what I believe actually. But, I don't know, like, I know it's not as offensive to guys if I were like, you know, I just want to be more feminine. I feel like this culture has been taking away my femininity and stuff because femininity has not hurt you in the same way.
You're on record for saying that.
Huh?
You're on record for saying that.
Yeah, you can clip that out and make it sound like I want it to be that way. No, I don't feel, just for the record, I don't feel like I need to be more feminine or whatever that would even mean. But, I mean, I often have felt like the culture wants me to be. But I mean, so I think it's hard just because of different experiences, like, for you to understand why it hurts so much when, like, a girl who has seen the effects of, like, a gendered or misgendered, at least, you know, community on people. I know it's hard to understand, like, why those little things, how those are connected to the big things, you know, like, and why that then, like, feels painful, but I don't know.
So I think that's, but I think, you know, getting back into the balanced mentality, I think that's, I find this interesting parallel between racism and sexism. Mm-hmm. I think that, you know, for like a white person to be like, I just feel really oppressed today, like everyone's gonna laugh at you. Like, just honestly, people are gonna laugh at you. Like, okay, you know, let's just talk about something serious. So for a similar way, for a guy to say something like, I feel oppressed as a man, you're gonna get laughed at because you're supposed to be the quote unquote dominant sex on the planet. So to say, like, you know, there's an engendered community, how come guys aren't considered part of that community too? I
believe that. No, well, what you were just saying, I wouldn't laugh at a man saying he feels oppressed.
Yeah,
I mean, I think our gendered culture does oppress men really terribly, and I think that that's another huge part of why I wish that it wasn't that way. I mean, like, I don't think guys are allowed to be their full, complete, just who they are. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of guys fight against that and are who they are, but there's a lot of resistance to that. But I hear what you're saying, and I think a lot of people would be like, what the crap are you talking about?
Yeah, it's like, it's just like, I mean, you're talking about with sexual assault. You know, every time there's like a man teacher with a female student, it's like the worst thing possible. But once you see these female teachers sleep with the guys, like, oh,
they're like, good for him, he's poor.
Yeah, you can make jokes on Leno without getting in trouble. But if you made a joke about a male teacher sleeping with a female teacher, you might as well cancel your show.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and then there's the flip side where it's like, well, every once in a while, an older female assaults a younger guy, and she's like plastered all over the news, and people just like ignore it.
Yeah, you forget it in like a week. There was probably like 2 of them last year or the year before, and it was like, wait, some girl in Florida, like you just.
Well, no, but we never even hear about all the men doing it. What I'm saying is compare that to the news coverage of a male doing it, and most of them never get to the news because I guess just because it happens so often. I don't know, but.
I mean, there's a whole show.
And people don't get as up in arms about it, and.
I think it's like violence in the schools. They'll do 6 months of reporting when a middle-class white school has shootings.
Right.
But when they have shootings in an inner-city black school, you know, that's not even newsworthy.
Right, because it doesn't fit into our stereotypes of what is like normal violence.
That's what we're accustomed to. It's not shocking.
Right.
You know, it's expected.
Yeah. I don't know. I know I'm extremely opinionated about this, and sometimes I'm really good at having really chilled out discussions where I just like hold my tongue. But then after a really rough week where I had some like awful experiences, it's just sort of like I don't know if I can handle this.
This is what this class is about, talking. If you don't talk, it's not going to be.
I hope that you got through like a lot of your stuff.
No, not really.
I don't feel like we did get through much of your stuff.
we really did. I think I don't know. It might go. The other stuff might go pretty quick. We got 3 classes left. And the last 2 I want to dedicate to a single topic, so we'll see.
I just need to not come to the gender one. I like what you're saying though.
You should come to see, this is what I think most important needs to happen, is these kind of conversations, because otherwise just like these two lasers missing each other all the time. You're just talking and I'm not hearing anything, and then I'm just responding to what I'm not hearing. So until people start talking about this, you're never going to get the picture. But everybody shies away. I don't want to talk about that. I'm going to get hurt. No.
I love to talk about the most taboo topics.
So do
in the
I.
world. I feel like sometimes I'll get into like a conversation with someone that I don't like know very well, and I'm sort of awkward. And like the first thing that will come to mind is the most like inappropriate. Like, so I hear you go to the Islamic Center like on weekends, and they're like, what? You bring up religion the first thing?
I love it.
Or I'll like be like, so wait, I hear that you voted Republican. No, I don't actually say that stuff, but it's the first thing that pops into my head, and I'm like, why?
I hate small talk. I'd much rather get down to the meat.
As soon as you said taboo topics, I kept thinking, shouldn't use that. I really wanted to talk about. I'm really curious about gender roles and how they are associated with the symbolism, the physical symbolism of gender, of genitals.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's really fascinating. I mean, just having a conversation a couple conversations I've had in the past, the idea of somebody sticking something in me is like one of the most awful things that I can think of. Like I have no desire to stick anything protruding inside me.
I just spent a weekend in the hospital, and they like stuck me with needles like all up and down my arms. So I feel ya.
It's just really, there's something very poetic about just the pure physicality of the structure.
Well, I haven't been able to do it in this class, but I like all of my writings about creativity is creativity and sexuality, and how the two relate. And just the other day I was writing about how I think, like, kind of getting back into our gender role thing. Like, I think it's true. I think there's this tendency to only see women as being vulnerable with sexuality. Like, I'm letting you into my body. So, looking at the sexual organs, I was like, yeah, it takes a lot of vulnerability to let somebody into you, but like the male genitalia is out. Like, it's exposed. Like, it takes vulnerability to be out. Like, so there's no just only women vulnerability. It takes vulnerability for the man to be out and the woman to let in.
Yeah.
You can have like really different cultural interpretations about the structure of it, actually, which I know I studied like way back when, and now I'm like, what is that? But it's a great question, and I think we sort of have these automatic interpretations that we go to, and I think a lot of them are good, but then like there's so much more too that I think, since it's so taboo, we don't really explore.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was all before the fall. Probably everything we would have been talking about this stuff with complete just ease. Seriously, like they were naked and not ashamed. I think we would have been able to study the sexual body and not be lusting.
You should come to the next class naked.
Good solution for like pre-fall then.
Let's just get right into it.
Everybody! Just tell them the next.
Visual demonstration.
You see how much shame you're feeling now? You shouldn't be feeling like you should be secure in who you are.
Each person will stand up and you can sit in your chair with your pointer. Describe the symbolism.
But yeah, I think there's beauty, like you're saying, beauty even down into the construction of the sexual organs. The like pictures of the, receiving and giving and holding, and I think it's all down to the minutest atom, without being ashamed.
Yeah. Someday we'll have to ask God all these questions. I mean, I still ask them now.
Someday, I'm waiting. I'm saving up mine.
I will hear what he has to say a little bit more clearly.
And he'll just be like, you guys should have just had fun. I think that's going to be his answer. Why are you guys worrying about all this? Just enjoy life.
I think